Just waiting on the wizard to tell us we're going to go live here in a second, so patience. Going to go ahead and call to order this November 1st, 2021 meeting of the Whitefish City Council. Steve Quinnell is excused this evening. Before we start with our pledge, I would like everyone here tonight to please join me in a moment of silence to honor Judge William Heilman, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family and friends this evening. Thank you. Thank you very much. With that said, Doug Adams, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Thank you, Doug. We'll move on to item 3 of our agenda, which is a presentation from John Phelps, his report on the Riverbend Trail, which the report is enclosed in the packet, and this comes from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Path Committee. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Mayor and councilors, I am the chairperson of the Whitefish Pedestrian Bicycle Path, it's a long one, advisory committee. And I'm here to tell you about what we've come up with. This will mirror some of the written report that we delivered to you. There'll probably be some new things in here, but pretty much take you through what we believe and the evidence we have and the facts we have. I'm going to talk fast because I've got 30 minutes and there's a lot to cover. So, Michelle, how about ready for the next one? Thank you. I'm not going to read from a lot of stuff, but I'm going to read it from this. So the Bike Ped Advisory Committee was established to provide advice and recommendations to City Council, Park Board, and City staff regarding development of pedestrian and bicycle trails. So that's why we're here. The plan for the River Trail is to establish a trail system that would interact with street traffic as little as possible. The Riverbend section is critical to the value, functionality, and use of the entire river system. Riverbend section is a particular community interest because the workarounds are not safe or accessible. This community interest was recognized back in 1983 when an easement agreement was executed by the city and the condo developer to allow for a path in this location. So, Michelle? And one more, Michelle. Okay. I'm going to go through a few practical reasons why river trails make sense, and some of you might have thought of these, some of you might not, but they're really important to understand. The first one is river corridors are often the only continuous undeveloped strip of land in a city. If you look down, you get up to 40,000 feet and look down on the city of Whitefish and try to imagine a way you could wind around through town without being on city streets or highways, the only thing you'll see and you'll pick up is the river. There's no other possible route to do it, but the river provides one, and that's found in cities across the nation. They turn to the river has land, the river typically is meandering and a pretty low elevation, flat land. You have to shoehorn things in sometimes, but they're a perfect way to get through your town without any traffic and just to have a perfectly safe bicycle and pedestrian path. The river trail is often the only type that completely separates users from traffic. The river trail is often the only strip of land that has a consistently level grade that allows ADA access. The river trail often connects city parks, which are often located beside rivers. Cities build their parks beside rivers. You build a river trail and all of a sudden you can connect up city parks. Our river trail will connect at least 4 city parks, and that's a good feature. A river trail provides recreational access to the river. some cities, some people, some properties don't have good access, and a river trail will allow a lot of people to come down and enjoy the river, jump in, launch a boat. They help in many ways. There's some aesthetic reasons I was going to go over before, and these are the ones you probably hear more often. And river trails provide natural beauty. Everyone craves beauty. River trails foster an appreciation of nature. They encourage users to seek natural beauty elsewhere. Rivers, trails, banks, and vegetation block noise and urban views. Users feel if they were far from the city. Typically, the river and the land around the river bottom is the lowest land in the community. And when you drop down to that level in a canoe or on your bicycle, frequently all you see are riverbanks and vegetation, and you can be going through a very busy part of town and you don't see it. And that gives a level of quiet and solitude that you just can't find. Like all trails, river trails promote a livable community and a healthy lifestyle. So next one, please. Oh, you're already up there. This graph just shows the area we're talking about. City Beach is the ultimate destination of the city trail, river trail. The town pump is where we can't go anywhere further south until MDT rebuilds the bridge. So we're looking at that. This is the section to be completed, and that can be completed. The only part that is incomplete in this section is the little circle there that is the riverbend section. Everything else is built and connects, and if we can complete that section, then it'll just be a continuous route, that entire distance. Thank you. I think everyone, well, most of us are familiar with the bridge and Miles Avenue and the condos. I just wanted to have this in case you're not. You can see the arrow pointing to the river's Veterans Bridge and up on Miles Avenue. This is what we're going to be talking about and where we're going to be. So now I'm going to talk about the current situation in what we have right now. And one more. Thank you. This is the river trail at the Veterans Bridge Underpass. This is what MDT built for us about 6 years ago. The city had asked MDT that when they build this new river bridge on Highway 93 West, will you include a way for us to get under it? And we kind of bird dogged them and kept them thinking about us. And sure enough, when they came up with the final plans, this is what it was. And they built this for us free. And this is supposed to be our way to get under the highway so that we don't have to cross the highway. And it's an interesting construction project because they basically had to use up some of the space that the river would have used up. They plunked this down where normally there would be water flowing. And I'm not criticizing them, but we'll talk later about how they got to do that and others don't. But it's very valuable to us. It was just something they got to do that we're kind of shocked to look back and see what they could do and now what we are restricted from doing. The next one, here's our dead end. The condominiums are right behind that. And then beside that are the stairs. And the city put the stairs in here because, you know, until we could do something with the trail and stretch it down farther, it was a dead end. So now we have stairs. You can get out and down. You can't if you're disabled. It's pretty hard to carry a bicycle up and down there. So it's awkward, and it's not used very often, but it's there. And we're not satisfied with it. The current route, starting down at K. Beller Park, you cross the highway. We're going north. You go up Miles Avenue, which we'll talk about. Take a left. There's a little stretch there of access road to the railroad that you have to go through before you get on the city trail. And that, I don't think we've had any problems there yet, but with railroad equipment using that for access, it could happen. But we won't talk about that tonight. Next one. Here's our problem area. It doesn't look so bad right now because we don't have much traffic that day. But getting across there, imagine getting across there in the middle of the summer and people are in a hurry and big trucks, little trucks, campers, everything lined up trying to get through town. And then you've got to shepherd a group of kids or your family or help a disabled person get through there. And it's just plain dangerous. And we'll talk about that a little more. Next one. This is the number, 10,508 vehicles per day. And that was the 2019 count. So we know that there will be more now. We don't know how many, but we think quite a lot. That's 73,000 a week. It's 3,800,000 vehicles per year. So if you imagine that many vehicles, and then you kind of assume that some of these drivers are new drivers, some of these may be careless, they may be drunk, they may be in a hurry, they may be late for work, they may be in a snowstorm, all the things that cause people to drive poorly. If you've got this many drivers coming through town, you're going to have some of those in there. And that's why we think it's a dangerous place to cross. This is Miles Avenue. If you follow the route that I was showing you, you have to go up Miles Avenue. And it's not pretty. It has a grade of 10%, and kind of the maximum typical rate for something to be ADA accessible is 5%. So it's twice as steep as it should be to allow disabled persons to travel up. Traveling down can be even worse. Parents have experienced kids on bicycles hitting that steep stretch and being unable to stop at the bottom. They're kids, their judgment isn't great, they're going fast, and they go right out onto the highway. And I don't think we've had anybody hurt seriously yet, but it's a pretty common thing. Other factors about Miles Avenue, it's uniquely unsafe, absolutely not ADA accessible. Parents, more than any, have talked to us about that concern. It's uniquely unattractive compared to the river route. It's a narrow road with a narrow sidewalk, far from the river. And the next one, this just shows you where Miles Avenue kind of plugs into the Burlington Northern Santa Fe track. And if you look at the picture to the left and see a little road heading away at an angle, that's the access road for the railroad. And as I mentioned, it may not be a great situation just because of the railroad traffic and the type of vehicles they drive. It's not striped for bicyclists or pedestrians. It's just a gravel road. And if we use the River Bend route, we would never have to use that. Now, we have been talking, our committee has been talking about options for the last 2.5 years. So I'm going to go through those. And there's 3 options, basically. One is do nothing, leave it as it is, continue to do exactly what we're doing today. People cross on their own at the highway. They go up Miles Avenue, or they go down Miles Avenue. ADA people that are disabled simply can't use most of that. There will be kids that shouldn't use it. There will be parents that complain about it. But one option is just to leave it like it is. And we don't support that. It's the exact opposite of our master plan goal. The master plan, the 2017 Connect Whitefish Master Plan, major emphasis is on connecting the trails and on safety. It's, from our point of view, the exact opposite of sound trail planning. If you have a choice between having an underpass and using it or crossing at the highway grade, you're normally going to take the underpass, and we have an underpass. It would be a breach of contract with MDT. Before MDT built the underpass for us, they had the city sign an agreement. They wanted to make sure that their underpass was going to be used. So in the agreement, they said, we'll build an underpass, but we want you to agree to develop your trail northward from our underpass up to the Burlington Northern Santa Fe loop trail. And so the city signed that. The city's obligated to do it, in my opinion, but so far hasn't done it. This trail, the way we're doing it now, you lose 560 feet of river frontage. Using this trail, the city gets absolutely nothing for the land it abandoned to the developer. It abandoned valuable land to the developer in order to get the bike bed trail that is supposed to run along the condos right now. The next one is the Switchback Route, and this was considered just because we thought crossing the highway was so bad. So the circular area there would be where the switchbacks would occur. People would come under the bridge, they'd come out on that short little stubbed out trail, and then they would go onto the switchbacks. And switchbacks are on the next page. This was drawn by an engineer for the city. It's a little hard to follow, but the blue is the trail, and the gold or yellow are yeah, thank you, retaining walls. And there's some really big and really tall retaining walls. But so you would start down in the kind of lower right corner, and you'd go a distance and then make a hairpin curve, go up, hairpin curve, go up further, hairpin curve, go up further, hairpin curve. And at each one of those turns, assuming the trail is 5 feet wide, at each one of those turns, you have to move 5 feet further back into that hillside. And so you keep moving further back, and at the top, you somehow move 20 feet back into that hillside, and we're not even sure that's possible. Our city engineers said that this would likely just be an enormous concrete edifice. The entire hillside would become concrete to contain these trails. So some people could traverse that. It would be difficult for a wheelchair, might be possible. Coming down, I wouldn't want to do it on a bicycle. I'd want to get off. But up near the top, it crosses the driveway to the condos, and then it heads up miles. And it hits miles at a point where miles is still 10%. And so you've done all this, which is awkward and inconvenient, and then you're out on miles. You go from a 10 to an 8, eventually to a 4% climb. And so it's kind of the worst of both worlds in the way we look at it. It's just not an attractive option. We talked for a long time and about whether people would use it. If they have the choice of crossing at the highway like they do now, which we believe is dangerous, or going under the underpass using that, but coming up this way, we concluded that people probably wouldn't use the switchbacks. It's you know, they should be, but they're not thinking about danger. It won't happen to them, I think, is the feeling. And so as they get to that point where they've got to make a choice, they can see across the highway, they can see exactly where they want to be, so they can walk there straight across the highway, or they can dip down under the bridge and then do this little windy thing up to where they were going to be anyway. So we found problems with that, and the main one was we just don't believe people will use it. People won't use a trail that is inconvenient or is longer than they think it should be, and no matter how nice you make it, they won't use it. So a few more comments about the switchbacks. This also would represent a breach of contract with MDT because you're not using their underpass to carry people up the riverbank. We're told by engineers that these would be high construction costs. We think it would be uniquely unattractive. It doesn't allow a connection to the Momquest property, and the Momquest property to the north has offered us an easement to connect with the Riverbend easement and then connect with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Loop Trail. So we can't do that if we use this route. We'd lose 653 feet, 563 feet of riverfront edge. The entire hillside would be destroyed and replaced with concrete. So we don't have a lot of positive things to say about that one. And we discussed this for at least a year and a half, kind of, because at one point we thought, well, maybe we could make it work, and we're so frustrated and tired of getting nowhere. We were really looking hard for an alternative. And when we concluded that people probably wouldn't use it, we had to drop it. So now the recommended route, and this is what's always been in the plan since 1999, is simply follow along the river, past the river bend property, across Casey's property, and tie in directly with the BNSF trail. And we can give you a number of reasons. With all trail users passing under the highway using the underpass, the at-grade crossing of Highway 93 would be completely eliminated. It'd be a huge safety improvement. If everybody that's heading up the river uses the underpass, the highway just becomes a non-issue. There's virtually no one crossing there. That danger is eliminated. They're all safely going under the river. The river trail currently is 100% accessible to disabled persons. With the recommended route, it would remain 100% accessible. With either of the other two routes, it would not be ADA accessible. The 2017 Connect Whitefish Master Plan identified this section as the most important and the primary section to be built next. Again, city signed a written agreement with MDT that they would do exactly this. They would extend the trail from the underpass. This would comply with that agreement if the city did it. This would complete the only missing link between the city beach and the Highway 93. We have talked with engineers and with trail builders, and they have assured us that this can be built and can be built without harm to the river and can be built well and something that would be sustainable and that would last a long time. And there are techniques for building these sorts of things. The city has invested 25 years and several $1 million in the river trail. We think we should continue that investment and build on it instead of drop it. And perhaps the biggest reason is that we've got other sections of the trail that haven't been built yet. And they're going to need to be built as close to the river as river bend. And if we can't do this, if we can't find a way to do this, then the Duck Inn and Walgreens and the property between the Duck Inn and Walgreens, they all result in the same issue. At times, we simply can't avoid being close to the river. But I think with proper engineering and best practices, we can make sure we don't hurt the river. And one more thing about the recommended route. The deed that the city received from the developer identified an area that the future easement would be in, but it didn't locate the future easement. The future easement was to be 6 feet wide. The parties didn't know at the time exactly where they wanted it, so they identified a much wider area. And if you look at this thing, it's barely colored in. There's kind of a yellow haze around the section, but from the 25-foot red marker to the 46-foot red marker, that is the strip of land that was identified in the deed as the future location. And so all that really has to happen is settle upon a 6-foot wide trail somewhere in there. And the city has said to the property owners, after not achieving anything through the negotiation, we've said, tell us where to put it. We'll put it wherever you pick. You just pick it. And as long as Fish, Wildlife, and Parks will approve of it, that's where we'll build it. We'll just turn it over to you. You make that decision. We asked them, to notify us in 60 days of their selection, and we didn't hear from them. So next step, making it happen. And these are the things we think need to happen. We have to enforce the easement that we hold. We need to pretty much demand that we get what we paid for, and that can be demand that the property owners sit down and agree on a location. And if they refuse to do that, then I don't know what else to do. I don't want to drop it. Our committee doesn't want to drop it, and it may mean litigation. Sometimes you have to do that to enforce your rights. So we hope that doesn't happen. But right now we've gotten nowhere in 10 or 12 years of negotiating. So enforce the easement, secure FWP approval. I wanted to show on this next slide, just so you'll understand this is the real thing. This is the easement that the developer gave the city. And you can see the date circled 1983. You can see the language. An easement for the establishment of a public walkway and bicycle riding path over, across, and through. And then it goes on to describe kind of the legal description. It says later in that paragraph that it's along the river. City got this, city recorded it, it's valid. These things don't run out of time, they don't wear out, they're forever. And it's been sitting there available to the city. And in this whole process, the city did nothing wrong. I've had people suggest that, well, the city caused this problem, and the city didn't do anything to cause the problem. The city is not demanding anything from the property owners that it's not entitled to demand. The city has behaved properly and honorably throughout this process. Next item, this is to show you what the property owners experienced. We told you that they learn of the easement before they buy the property, so they're aware of it when they buy the property. There's a couple ways they can do that. Typically, before you buy property, you get a preliminary policy of title insurance, and it tells you any easements, any restrictions on your property. And you look at that and you decide whether or not to buy that property. And if you buy the property, then you buy it subject to those restrictions and easements and such. And this is a sheet out of a preliminary policy of title insurance for one of the River Bend condos. And you can see item number 10 there, that describes the city's easement. So this individual had a title policy in their hand when they decided to buy this. They knew the city had an easement. They probably hoped that it wouldn't be built, but they knew it could be. And the next item over the second half of this page is a warranty deed, and this is a different homeowner that bought a unit. And in this one, in the legal description, the title company actually added a description of the easement, saying subject to the easement as such in an instrument dated and recorded, and the dates and the recording information is the city's easement. So this person had it in their deed. They clearly know about it. The next thing has to do with FWP. We applied to FWP a year and a half ago for a 4-foot wide gravel path. We kind of wanted to start out with what we thought was the least harmful and kind of the smallest thing, and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks wouldn't approve it. And so that was a big setback because we had no idea that was going to happen. So we've been looking lately to see what other cities do. One of the things Fish, Wildlife, and Parks said about our 4-foot wide gravel trail is that it was too close to the river, and they'd never seen anything built this close to the river. So we started calling around the state, and we discovered Great Falls, and that was a very good day for us. The next page is called the Sun River Connector. This is a bike trail that Great Falls built in 2016. It connected two sections of trail that were apart. And could you maybe, Michelle, just try to move in there? It's a little hard to see, but that trail is pretty much extended out over the riverbank, and you can see some vertical iron posts or so there supporting it. But it's out over the riverbank. And if you turn the next page, there's a before and after. The before picture shows the highway before the 10-foot wide concrete trail was added. And you can see there's no flat ground to build it on. So they used good engineering and good design, and they built it on these steel pipes coming out of the riverbank, driven deep into the deep hard soil. And those pipes support the entire weight, and it is cantilevered out over the riverbank. And the after picture shows how little of the riverbank you can see looking over there. When the river comes up, some of this is underwater. And this was approved by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. It was not an issue. It didn't come up. It wasn't even discussed. No letters back and forth. Great Falls applied, and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks said, this is fine. The next one is another trail. This was built a little longer ago, but you can see it's built directly on a riverbank. And the page after that shows where it goes, and you can see it goes down under the bridge. And if Michelle can zoom in a little there, you can actually see where it drops down under the bridge. And then on the other side, it climbs up a little and continues on down the riverbank. But it's built, it's concrete, and it's built directly on the riverbank. They found a way to do it in a stable manner, and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks approved this one with no questions asked. The next photo, next two photos, are just an older trail in Great Falls. I don't have a lot of information about this, but you can see from the location, it's built directly on a riverbank, and it's being used. They consider it a good trail. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks didn't have any comments about it. Yet, like all, had to be approved by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And so these three samples tell me what Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and Great Falls will allow you to do. And the agency, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, is supposed to be a statewide agency that treats everyone the same, and the regions are, different offices, but they're also supposed to apply the same rules and same regulations and treat applicants the same way. And it's just not happening. We had no idea this was being allowed in Great Falls, and the gentleman we were dealing with at our local Fish, Wildlife, and Parks office also had no idea. So the fact that these are happening, that Fish, Wildlife, and Parks is approving them, that they're modern, that they're well-built, they're working, tells us that we ought to be able to come up with a design that would do the same. Next one, please. We received a letter from an engineer that has been helping us a lot. He's been practicing in Great Falls for 30 or 40 years. He's with Thomas, Dean, and Hoskins. He specializes in bridges and trails, and he's built many, many trails, including some of them we looked at. And he wrote to you, all of the Great Falls trails constructed near the rivers have been reviewed and approved by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks prior to construction. None of Great Falls' applications from FWP have been denied. The Region 4 FWP office has followed state and federal law as they work to balance the need to protect Montana's waterways with the benefits of providing for recreation, transportation, and other benefits. In all cases, the local FWP office agreed with the city's position that the trails were justified by their tremendous benefit to the city, its residents, and its visitors. And that's what we thought we would meet, that kind of attitude and approach, when we applied to our local FWP, and it just didn't happen. So in saying that this has never happened in Whitefish, or they've never seen anything like this in Whitefish, they forgot about the 10-foot wide concrete trail underpass they built in the river for us. You couldn't get more in the river than that. The thing virtually is sitting in the river. The river moved over, and if you can do that, it's hard to imagine why we couldn't build a small trail on the riverbank. This was in the river, we would be on the riverbank. We're still scratching our head about that one. Now, when building in wet areas, the city has discovered techniques that can be used. This doesn't look particularly pretty. Next one, thank you. But this is a part of the city's trail system. They built this over Cow Creek, but Cow Creek is only about 5 feet wide. The wetland spreads out from that, so they didn't want to run equipment and vehicles and such on the wetland. So they used what are called, helical piers. Thank you. Helical piers are stout steel poles with a big screw on the bottom, and you just screw them into the ground until they won't screw anymore, and you know you've hit solid soil. And then you can use that to begin building your section of trail. And all this entire thing rests on these helical piers, and no excavation was done. And it's set up so that the vehicle that does this can drive up to the edge of your area, put in 4 of the helical piers. Those are all connected, a deck is put on it, and then the vehicle drives out on that first deck, do it again, drives out on the next deck, and go all through the wetland area, until you get to the other end. And no vehicle has ever gone down into the wetlands. And it's a really popular and well-known way of building things like this. The next picture is, back one. There. This one is a similar thing to what you just saw. This is just much longer. This is in a wetland off of Edgewood. It's about, I think, 250 feet long. Same thing, though, 10-foot wide, entirely supported by the helical piers. And just to show you that this happens in Glacier National Park, this is the Trail of the Cedars. And this has been up there for a long, long time. Most of it is elevated. Some of it is elevated 4 or 5 feet. The park is pretty careful about building things in wetlands. They generally have to jump through a lot of hoops, and there's a lot of environmental analysis. And I think they did that, and they decided this was a reasonable thing to build in their wetland. And when that creek floods in the spring, it's not just a wetland. These things are standing in water, and it works, and it's well liked. One thing about the river bend section that I wanted to point out, if you can zoom in on the next one, Michelle, please. This is just a zoomed in picture of a section of the riverbank. And if you thought that the riverbank was, planted with native plants and a lush undergrowth and just a beautiful, beautiful riverbank, that's what it looks like. That's what you get. And I think we could only improve that by building a trail. I don't think you could, I'm not sure you could hurt that. But that's what is there today. So conclusion is, current situation is very unsafe, highly inaccessible, a critical disconnect in the river trail. A very safe, highly accessible connection is possible. The easement exists and is enforceable. The northern portion is currently available to connect to. Precedent has been set for FWP approval. So our request is that the council direct the city attorney to take steps necessary to enforce the easement. Now that doesn't necessarily mean litigation. We've found in dealing with the owners that if we don't seem like we're serious, or if we don't keep coming back to them, they blow us off and they forget about us. If they really believe that the city means it this time, I think you'd probably find them willing to cooperate and to compromise, but they've never been in that position. I'd like the council direct the parks department to develop pathway designs. We're thinking that some would be elevated, some might not have to be elevated. I'm not a designer and our committee hasn't designed anything, so we would ask that parks get involved in that. And we'd like the council direct the public works department to begin applying for FWP approval for the new design. Now, except for a few pictures, we're going to go through quickly. That's my presentation. If you could go to the Cherry Creek Trail, please, Michelle. There you go. If you, Michelle, maybe just go through all these to the end, 5 seconds or so each, and I won't even talk, but I want people to see these. These are ones that other cities have done across the nation, and they're not too tricky. That's my hometown. This is Boulder Creek. And all of these, the trail is smack dab up against the river or over it. And it worked. And it's working all across the country. And we're just learning, and I think we need to learn a little bit more to develop confidence that we can do this. But we can't. So that's all of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, John, and thanks to the committee for their assistance in preparing the report. I imagine many of you may be here to provide comment on this item. Can you just please raise your hands if you plan to provide comment during public comment? With that said, so the council does hear public feedback on this matter, I'm going to go ahead and just rearrange the agenda, and we're going to go ahead and take public comment now before the council deliberates. So I would first ask that those here to comment on this item, please approach the podium and your name and address for the record, please, because we have a long meeting ahead of us. If you could keep your comments to 3 minutes, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you agree with the previous commenter, you can just say, I agree with the previous commenter. So please step right up.
I'll just go quickly so we can get moving. My name's Ron Brunk. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name's Ron Brunk. I live at 640 West 5th Street here in beautiful downtown Whitefish. As the Whitefish Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan states on page 12, number 1, a brief history. I was involved in drawing up the original bike pedestrian master plan over a couple of years at the Great Northern back in the late 80s. Began serving on the Whitefish Parks and Recreation Board in 1997, and I was involved in developing the first Whitefish bicycle pedestrian plan that the City Council adopted in July of 1998. In 2017, when the city adopted the current plan, I was again on the Whitefish Parks and Recreation Board that approved that plan prior to it coming, and we approved it at the Parks Board level prior to it coming to the council. And so my point in this is that I've been involved in this bike pedestrian planning since its beginning here in Whitefish. I've seen every rendition of it, from the barroom napkin to the current plan that you have. In all of those, we identified 3 major problems that we had for connecting trails in Whitefish. It was the river, the railroad, and Highway 93, the 3 things that separate our town. Since that original bike pedestrian plan was adopted, we've connected trails over the river in 3 places. We've gotten under the railroad tracks and connected the north side of town with the south. But we've yet to safely connect trails across Highway 93. Crossing Highway 93 as a bike rider or a pedestrian has never been an easy endeavor, and with the traffic increase in the last few years, it's become nearly impossible to safely do so. In 1983, the City Council caught a vision of a trail along the river and acquired this easement. The MDT, in response to our master plan, constructed a path under Highway 93 when the reconstruction of Memorial Bridge happened. There's no other place in Whitefish to make a safe crossing of 93. This is the place, and now is the time. This was the first trail easement that we acquired, and now 38 years later, we still haven't built it. This is the missing link to a really good bike pedestrian trail system in our city. So I encourage you to move forward with the construction of this critical piece of trail. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bruce Booty, landscape architect, 301 2nd Street, Whitefish. And I just wanted to reinforce what has been said here so far. And a lot of planning for this and bike trail happened kind of ad hoc before there was an official committee. So the first meetings for this section of trail, again ad hoc, were in 1983, and it resulted in the City Council granting the sale or exchange of property that they owned to allow the builder of the Riverbend condos to get the number of units they felt they needed to make the project profitable. In exchange for that, they were going to provide the easement for this bike ped trail. And again, that was in 1983. So a lot of things that have transpired since then, and a lot of work was done to try to get our trails to the point where we knew we could make those connections on the south end, going under the highway, and on the north end with the BNSF loop. And having, the critical element of getting around town is this grade separated crossings, which we were able to get from MDT. We've been able to get the grade separated crossing under the railroad trestle. We're looking forward to a time a few years from now where we can get another grade separated crossing where Highway 93 crosses the river by the town pump. Those are absolutely critical elements. There's no other way, as you heard from John, safely through town. As traffic increases, trucks increase, it needs to be done. And I think this is just a critical element. So the council in 1983 voted unanimously to accept this easement from the developer of the Riverbend condos. So it's been a while, 28 years. And I think what we're asking for tonight is that this council follow the lead of the earlier council and pursue this easement and the following requirements that John explained earlier. I won't go into all that again. So I think we've studied and studied this crossing, and details of it may need to be worked out, but the bottom line right now is there's no safe crossing of Highway 93 and going north except for this underpass. That is the route to get through town and not endanger the citizens of this community. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bruce.
Good evening. My name is Austin Reese. My family and I recently moved to Whitefish. My wife and two daughters, 10 and 6. And part of the reason that we moved here was for all the accessibility to the outdoor spaces. While there are still challenges around the city for accessibility, most people have gone out of their way to help us get in and around and in stores, out of stores, whatever we need. It's been amazing. To hear some of the proposed solutions under Veterans Bridge and towards City Beach is either a set of switchbacks instead of the stairs or a crossing 93 and going up Miles Avenue is frustrating, seems unsafe, when there appears to be a much safer solution that seems less impactful to the community as a whole. I have a hand cycle that the overall length is about 8 feet. So to do those switchbacks, needless to say, that hand cycle doesn't turn easily. So that would be inaccessible for me and my family to do as well. So it would be having to cross 93 again, which is unsafe. The only viable solution that I see that is safe for people with physical disabilities is continuing the current path that would go in front of the condominiums on Miles Avenue along the river. Right now, I don't feel that's safe for me and my family to try and cross 93 and head up Miles to rejoin the current bike path. I hope that you guys will continue to make myself and other people who use wheelchairs welcome and safe in the community. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Austin. Appreciate the comments.
Hello, Mayor. Hello, City Council. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Rachel Schmidt. I am third generation in Whitefish. I was born here. I'm one of those crazy kids that's embedded like a tick. I'm the former director of the Montana Governor's Office of Outdoor Recreation, and during that time, my office was actually located directly across the street in the office building where this easement is. All of this information is amazing, and the history that's gone into this easement. In my work in the governor's office, I worked across the country talking about recreation. And yes, this river trail is recreation opportunity for this town, but it's literally transportation. I'm raising 2 kids here, and they use this trail literally to get around town. I'm very familiar with the challenges of this intersection, this crossing, and this trail. And if we don't go with this committee's recommendation, it is just throwing years of work out the window. There are many towns across this country that would kill to be in the position that we're in right now to have these options. And I know that it comes with challenges, and this is not going to be an easy trail to build, but I can assure you the trail that we do build, it's going to be worth it. And anything we do to this river has been brutalized by the citizens of this town for 100 years, right, in using it, whether it was timber. My grandpa was in the timber industry. My dad was in the railroading industry. Like, this river has seen not a lot of love, but in recent years, we have given a lot of love, right? And everybody loves to enjoy it. But any improvements that we make, any trail we put in there, it's going to be an improvement because that's what we're doing for this river now. Now, we're part of a group called Safe Trails Whitefish, and we really want to support this committee's plan, and we approve and support them taking this, you guys taking this all the way through to see it to the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, council members. My name is Jamie Gogan, 4500 Two Bear Trail. Extraordinary outdoor recreation opportunities and a vibrant community is what makes Whitefish so unique. It's why our family settled here in 2002, why we've contributed so much to the Whitefish area conservation recreation projects, and why Two Bear Capital is located in Whitefish, because it's able to recruit extraordinarily talented people to the valley. Michael and I, my husband, are lucky enough to be able to enjoy the extraordinary benefits of getting out into nature right in our backyard on the nationally recognized Whitefish Trail. We know how important it is to get a nature fix. It's important for our health, it's important for our wellness, peace of mind, economic vitality, and quality of life. We strongly believe that everyone should have an opportunity to experience high-quality outdoor recreation access regardless of fitness level, physical capability, or age, especially while in town. That's why I'm here today. I'm urging this council to stand up for the public's right to enjoy a trail along the Whitefish River by making the connection at Veterans Bridge North a priority. When you do your part to make a safe and accessible connection, other landowners, like Michael and myself, can do our part to make the dream of a Whitefish River Trail connected for all from City Beach all the way to the 40. It may be challenging, but improving this connection is a must. The current situation is indeed dangerous. My 6-year-old, while being urged to cross the street because traffic was building up, fell in the middle of the street with her bike, and that was very scary. So families on bikes, mobility challenged, parents with strollers, for all those residents and visitors, the staircase might as well be a brick wall, and the Miles Avenue walk around is much too steep, and you're right, especially going downhill. The public right of access has been on the books for nearly 40 years, so it's time to make the connection now. Other communities have built river-friendly trails, and so can we. We understand the difficulties, but encourage you to pursue courageously a safe, accessible trail solution. There were few times during the development of the Whitefish Trail that we thought the project would collapse. Several of you on the council today were sitting at those tables. But we stayed with it, we took a risk, and followed through on the amazing amenity that we have today, which generates an estimated $6.4 million annually for our beloved community. Sincerely, Michael and Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
Leaving this letter for you guys.
Good evening. My name is Julie Tickle. I'm the Executive Director of Dream Adaptive Recreation. Dream is a nonprofit that's been based in the Flathead Valley in Whitefish for 36 years. About the time it seems like the easement was received by the city to pursue this opportunity. So it's pretty fitting that we are here in support of the committee's recommendation today. Dream was founded in '85, so that was 5 years before the ADA was signed into Congress. A group of Flathead locals based in Whitefish saw that many of the city parks and recreation places were not accessible to those with mobility challenges. So it's been on the hearts and minds of the community since then to really push for access for all community members. Dream provides programming for over 300 people annually. We provide an adaptive mountain bike program that has been extremely popular the last few years, and we hope to provide a paved path cycling program in the next few years that would use this exact route. We expect it to be extremely popular. In addition to providing our programs, we also are part of many current access projects around the community As I mentioned, they're near and dear to our organization, and we are extremely focused on supporting groups and access projects that allow all community members to have safe and accessible routes around town and to access the great outdoors. We strongly encourage you to pursue this opportunity to continue the trail along the riverfront. The switchbacks, as Austin mentioned, and many others, are not a viable option for people with mobility challenges, and it would really just be a full stop. The Miles Avenue corridor is extremely unsafe in both directions, especially coming down that. We have tried it with our bikes, and we've squashed that program altogether going that route due to safety and accessibility issues. I appreciate your time tonight and listening to this really important project for the community to make sure that everyone has access to the great outdoors. So thank you.
Thank you. Diane.
Good evening, Council. I want to first thank the Bike Ped Committee for the hard work. I want to thank Bruce Booty for his hard work sticking with it. I want to thank you all for your hard work and following in the footsteps of prior councils. And I agree with everything everyone has said, which is the current situation is unacceptable. The time is now to act. And I want to let you know that as a co-founder of Safe Trails Whitefish with Rachel Schmidt, we will be here with you as you make tough decisions. I've been here with you as we've made tough decisions on the Whitefish Trail. I mean, we started with our neighborhood plan in 2004, kicked off the effort 2002. Here we are in 2021. We cut the first ribbon in 2010. Good things can take a while, but I want to let you all know that we are here to support you in making the decisions, which are obviously tough. I mean, that's why it hasn't been done for 38 years. So, but, you know, I've been involved in a couple of lawsuits that involve protecting public access. You don't ever get it back. And so I do want to encourage you to take appropriate legal action. I'm not sitting here playing armchair legal counsel, but you know, sometimes these issues are hard, they're challenging, but they're worthwhile. So, and you'll hear that tonight, I think, from everyone. So we will be here with you. So thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Kim.
Hi. Thank you all for all the efforts you've made thus far to put our trails to good use and make them accessible and available to the members of our community. I am just a member of the community until recently. Now I live outside of city limits, but I lived at 205 East 4th Street. So that's the neighborhood that's adjacent to Mountain View Manor. And I've witnessed many people of different abilities using the trail that goes around on the river right by Mountain View Manor, but also I've been with friends and other community members, and yeah, it's when you get to the end of the trail for the first time to the staircase, it is kind of a disappointment, and I'm hoping that it will be an improvement. And I'm with Diane. I encourage you to pursue the extension, and I'll also give whatever support I can in that effort. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim.
Hi, I'm Pat LaTorrell, 418 Lepfer Avenue, and I was the old council that put forth the motion that was unanimously approved on May 2nd, 1983, and I'm hoping that this council will go ahead and finish the job that has started 38 years ago. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bridget Larson, and I'm one of the owners of the condo association. So I'd just like you to look at another point of view. I am a native Montanan. I've been coming to Whitefish my entire life to enjoy the beauty of this nature that we all love. I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase one of them. That's my home. And of course it's a personal stake for me because they're going to take off my deck. The deck that my children and my grandchildren, I mean, the plans that I saw go right over my deck. The people that live in those condos, they have children and grandchildren, and they're good people, and this is their place that they come for respite. And I can't even imagine where you would put a trail. There's no room for it. And I have to say that that picture was so misleading, like that we can improve this. Well, that picture was when the water's way down. I will tell you, the water is right up to my deck when the river's up. It's full of ducks that are nesting. There are beautiful, I don't know, many hundreds of years old trees there. And I understand why people want to improve the path. I understand it, but I'm there day and night, and I watch the people that use it. I watch the people that use the river. One thing that I see, because I walk the trail a lot, is there are a lot of people who come off of the train, and they follow the river, and they camp, and they sleep. And there's theft, and all of this that everyone along there talks about, but maybe everyone here that's looking at papers and drawings and so forth, they don't understand that. So you're going to bring that closer into town, I feel. Besides destroying the riverbed, which is just a shame in my mind. I have a neighbor. I understand disabilities. I have people that are disabled in my own family. There are other ways to get to City Beach, and under the new overpass, and there's a trail. It takes you right along there. You can park down there. There's other ways to go. My neighbor, who owns a condo next to me, is blind, and he said he's owned it for years, and he said, I don't know why they don't put one of those lights like they have down by the post office, because he said, I have a real concern with the traffic that comes flying in from the highway, because he said that would really slow the traffic down before it hit the center of town. And I would imagine that would be much more cost effective than what is being proposed. Anyway, I just want to say that there's a lot of other sides to look at as well. Many people use the river that are on the river. So yes, there is, using the bike path to walk or bike or so forth, but you should see how crowded that river is. They can barely, if you build out into the river, you're gonna lose a lot of amazing nature that people use there too. So there's a lot of things to look at. I just want to say that the condo people are good people, and they want good things for this community as well, and they just don't happen to agree that that's the best way to control that situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. Fitzy.
Hi, my name's Mike Fitzgerald, and I'm from 412 Lupfer and Whitefish here. I was involved in the beginning of the bike trails from the very beginning, and I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. The city has done a fabulous job, and it's just a huge success story. But for the first time now, we couldn't do this before, because the property that Casey Momquist owned, the family that lived there, they wouldn't give us easement. So now that Casey owns that property and the state built that beautiful underpass for us, we can now do it. So we couldn't do it before, but now we can. So now is the time to strike and do it. And I'm sure we can all work together and get it done, and it can look nice. From the very beginning, we did have roadblocks. There were people who were against it, but we worked through it and we accomplished our goal. But this is like a black hole. We have to work this out, and we need to go underneath the viaduct, not the viaduct, but underneath the bridge. I hope you all decide to do it, because it's going to help Whitefish tremendous. Thank you.
Thanks, Fitzy.
Hello, My name is Thomas. I live at the Mountain View Manor, which is actually right on the trail, right next to the Kay Baylor Park right there. I can actually remember the first time I went to go use that trail to get towards City Beach. I knew that it was in that direction, so I went over there and I came underneath the bridge and saw the stairs and said, okay, well, that's not gonna work. As you can imagine, having a bike path that you need to leave the bike path and cross a busy road, even if there is like a flashing intersection light or something like that, kind of defeats the purpose of the bike path. So I'm just here to voice my support for the committee's decision for their recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas.
My name is Jonathan Ferry, and although I am an employee of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, I also am a resident of Whitefish for 20 years, and so I've gotten a lot of experience with this river. And so the only thing I would add to all the current designs would be do not build out the trail into the river. Do not cut down the willows, the decadent willows that are on the stream bank. And then I haven't seen where the current easement is related to the current apartment, the homeowners association. And so it's hard for me to make a judgment on this without seeing that. But if you don't build out into the river and you don't cut down the decadent willow trees, then we have room to work. And that's all I had to say.
Thanks, John.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Antonia Malchik. I live at 528 9th Street West in Whitefish. And as you requested, I won't repeat everything I agree with. Just to kind of distill it down for me, I live in the west side of Whitefish and moved back here in 2014 to raise my family. Whitefish is my hometown. And there are a lot of young families who live in that west side of town who use this crossing all the time, especially with young children. The stairs are not usable for kids. They're not usable for a cargo bike. They're obviously not usable for a wheelchair or most mobility issues. But fundamentally, I know that many of you have been involved in making Whitefish a strong and connected community, especially with this trail system, for a long time. What I don't know is if any of you use this network for transportation. And there's no requirement that you have to do that, but I think it is very hard to understand what a massive barrier this is if you don't use the trail system for transportation. My family does, a lot of Whitefish families do, and this particular location, as Jamie Gogan says, I had written down, it's like having a wall right in your face or like a ravine. And with the traffic increases, it's gotten worse. My son and I were almost hit just a couple of weeks ago. And I know that striping and flashing lights is attractive, but I walk my kids to school every day, and we use the flashing lights at Baker, and we use the flashing lights at Spokane, and I use all the crosswalks, and I can tell you that 50% of the time people are looking at their phones when they're driving. A lot of the other time, they're just what I've heard a police officer in St. Paul call tunneled. People just don't pay attention to the roadscape, to other people on it. And those locations, there's not a lot we can do, but this one, there is. And I just want to reiterate something that John talked about. I'm not sure if it fully came through, but the city did give up very valuable property so that these condominiums could be built. And in exchange, the city received the easement. That is what the papers say when Patty Luttrell talked about it. You know, that's the minutes of the city council meeting that she had made the motion on. And I think it's important to remember that the city gave up property in exchange for an easement, and all we're asking is that that easement be honored. I do understand that there are some current concerns about riparian issues, possibly along the river. And I know that's a tricky one, but again, I think the only way we can put that up as a true barrier is by not fully understanding how important this section is. It seems small, it seems insignificant, but it really cuts off parts of town from each other. And if we're really committed to this trail system and to making Whitefish a place where people can walk and bike and get around without getting in a car and being another part of the traffic problem, then this has to be a part of it. And I think we need to honor the vision that the City Council had in 1983. And I would like the homeowners to honor their part of the agreement as well. I also have an easement from the city on my yard, and it's just as close to my kitchen window as this would be. And that was in the deed when we bought the place, and we knew that. And these decisions aren't easy, but I think we all have to work together to make sure we make decisions for the good of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I am Rachel Thompson. I live at 1003 Creekview Drive in Whitefish. And this is my first meeting, so it's quite exciting to be here. And I just want to say, I was born in 1983. I think someone accidentally said that was 28 years ago, which I appreciate, but it was 38. So learning that this easement has been in place my entire life is shocking, and I have 2 children on bikes now, and I wish this trail was safer and more useful as transportation. As a mom of a 6-year-old who is going from camp through Whitefish to City Beach, that scares me when they are on bikes and there isn't a continuous path. So I grew up in a town that had a riverfront trail that truly became the lifeblood of that town. And I really think the question is, what kind of town does Whitefish want to be? A town that makes investments and enhancements and sacrifices to prioritize the most vulnerable in that community. Otherwise, we're just making excuses and delays. And I really hope that my daughter, my son, aren't standing up here when they're 38 asking for this to be done.
Thanks, Rachel. Doug.
My name is Doug Reed. I live at 520 Summers Avenue, and I am a member of the Bicycle Pedestrian Path Advisory Committee. See, John, I said it. I said it all. Back May 2nd, it's been said before real quickly, 1983, the developer, it was council action number 5, I read the minutes, developer to grant a public use easement to the city along the river, the width and extent location of which to be determined by the city and the developer, moved by Pat Lotterell, seconded by Helen Tate, and all voted unanimously. So all I do is I urge you, the council, to honor this decision and just take step 1, and that is just to honor the easement. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Mayor and members of the council, my name is Alan McCormick. I'm an attorney with Garlington and Lana Robinson. My client is the River Bend Homeowners Association. I sent you a letter, and I trust that's been distributed to everyone. I won't repeat everything that's in there, but I did want to put a face with a name so that we can continue to have discussions that we started back in, well, I personally became involved in about 2017, and more recently in 2019, we presented a formal offer to the city to trade easements and to look for other solutions for this. And the city and our clients met on site and began discussions about what that might look like and how it might take place. We expected those conversations would continue. I suspect due to COVID and some other things, those discussions got put on hold. But our next introduction to the topic was when we received notice of this draft report. And so this draft report is the only thing that we can review at this point. There are no specifications in this report to allow us to examine what a trail might look like through this easement. And that was the same case when the city asked for it's called a 124 permit from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks back in 2019. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks issued a draft environmental statement in there. There were no specifications in there, except to note this. The trail would have to go in a 6-foot easement. It could only be 4 feet wide. It would have to be gravel. It would go from an 8-foot wide concrete version that you saw on the slides today and immediately go and abruptly go into a 4-foot wide gravel section that would never meet ADA accessibility requirements. It will also be underwater for significant chunks of the popular summertime when people use the trail. Those are major concerns, of course, to the homeowners associations, and should be major concerns for you as you consider whether a trail can really work in this location. I think that's why the city reached out to the condo association and said, can we look at alternatives? We need a year-round location, one that can meet ADA accessibility, and that started that discussion. We acknowledge the switchback version has challenges as well. It's got some steep grades, it's got some tight corners and the like, and isn't the best option either. You hired additional engineers. Those engineers, KLJ, issued a memo in January of this past year analyzing all of these alternatives, recommended against building the trail that this report is pushing. For the same reasons that I've mentioned, 4 feet wide gravel cannot accommodate the expected amount of traffic that would use the trail, cannot meet ADA requirements, will be underwater for certain portions of the year. Didn't recommend the switchbacks either, did recommend the at-grade crossing, and we know that has challenges too. My point in being in front of you tonight is to say the condominium association is acting in good faith. It's having conversations with you. Mr. Phelps and I know each other from past litigation. Ms. Jacobs and I know each other from, we actually clerked at the same law firm, so we know each other. We're ready to discuss the options with you, putting together a full good faith attempt to find a solution that overcomes some of these challenges. When we have some specifications that we can look at, it'd be a great time, but we're willing to look at any option that you have and to meet with you at your convenience and at your place of choosing so that we can continue these discussions. Thank you.
Alan, of course we remember you, the donut.
Well, I was hoping that wouldn't come up, but yes, sir.
I'm Doug Adams. First note would be that several years ago, people did talk with MDT and try to get them to put a flashing light on that at-grade crossing, and MDT refused to do that. So that, not that you can't revisit that, but more than likely that would not happen. I'm a strong advocate for property rights, and I'm also very politically incorrect. And so if I had one inkling of an idea that the city, be it via the committee, the council, or anybody else, had harangued, harassed, or bullied anybody about this easement, had done anything untoward, anything that they shouldn't have done, I'd be up here standing in defense of the property owners of the HOA. But the fact of the matter is that has not happened. I worked as a volunteer for the city as a bike path easement negotiator for approximately 15 years. And in that time, we really tried hard to be a good neighbor. I never bullied anybody. I never harassed anybody. And if I went to get an easement and somebody said no, then no is what it was. There was a handshake and there were no hard feelings. That's the way we operate. That's the way we've always operated. Now, I've not done it. I don't remember when I resigned from that position, but it's 3 or 4 years ago. This situation is the exact opposite of that. We already have the easement, a legal binding easement. And yet, because the city wants to be a good neighbor, the city does want to work with people, we worked for years with the people associated with this HOA to try to get them to come to the table and do something. We don't owe them anything. They act like they are the aggrieved party. They're not. They have stonewalled us year in and year out. And we went along with it, trying to come up with a solution. So we had meetings with them. We had meetings without them. We had engineers. We have looked at every way that we can figure out to build this and have minimal impact on them. I understand they're worried about devaluing their property. I understand they want access to the river. The fact of the matter is they've got decks that go to the riverbank anyway. So if FWP says that they're not allowed, you know, a structure is not allowed there, they're already there. And if you look at the drawing, the schematic of the easement, which I believe is 46 feet wide on one side and 25 feet on the northern end. On the southern end, it actually touches the building, if I'm correct. And it's not far off on the northern end. So it was in the paper the other day that the city has acted with outcome goal, and they've not acted very genuine with the HOA. Well, that's a bald-faced lie. There's no truth to that whatsoever. If that had been the case, any time in the past 38 years, we'd have bulldozed the darn decks off and built the stupid thing. There's no truth to it at all. And we have the legal right to do that. I don't even understand why we're talking about litigation at all. Build the stupid thing. What are they going to do? They can sue. They're going to lose. Why? We got an easement. It's really obvious. And that's what this issue is about. There's no debate as to what the value is to the community. There's no debate about whether we have a legal easement. And so now, because we're standing in front of the council, all of a sudden they want to come to the table and work out a solution. They've only had one solution since this whole thing began. And that solution, don't build it there. Well, that's not the solution. As John has shown, as Bruce has shown, everybody has shown for years, as engineers have shown, that any other route is inaccessible and unacceptable. So now is the time to build it. You cannot reason with unreasonable people. And that's what we've got here. So they have stonewalled us year after year after year after year. How much longer are you going to be nice? How much longer are you going to be bullied? How much longer are you going to be ignored? Utterly unacceptable. I tried to be strategic when I was the negotiator. And I bit my tongue when we were dealing with this HOA. But now the time is up. If you can't get an unreasonable person to be reasonable, do what you've got a right to do. If they don't like it, they shouldn't have bought the dad-burn unit. That's not my fault. It's not your fault. It's their fault. That agreement is binding. That agreement needs to be stood by. So I encourage you to do that. And I've got a skid steer over here. Oh, I'll say one last thing. If you don't want the bridge out over the water, the only option is to put it through where the decks currently are. My suggestion to the HOA is get on the bandwagon and help us get permission from FWP to put a boardwalk out over the river. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Riley.
Thank you. It's kind of hard to follow that one. Thank you, council, and thank you, Bike Ped Committee, because what you guys are doing for our town, our community, is outstanding. Not just with recreation, but really a lot of things. You guys have been through a lot lately, and I really do appreciate that. I wanted to say that tonight. And then I also want to say I am lucky enough to live downtown at 327 O'Brien, neighbors with Thomas and the Mountain View Manor folks, formerly with Kim, and close to Fitzy and Patty. And as you probably know, they're not here tonight, but I do have 2 golden retrievers that are typically in my company. And we frequent this trail a lot. Now, they're pretty able right now. They don't mind going up that set of stairways. And in the winter, it's impassable because it's not shoveled. So we have to go, no matter what, we have to go on Miles Avenue. And it is dark up there in the winter, and it is dangerous sometimes when people come tearing out of BNSF on their way home or wherever. So It's, obviously I don't have to say much about that, but it's amazing what we're doing with this community. And we have access to this river that we don't have access with the lake. I mean, if you have a boat, you can get on the lake, and that's great, but walking around the lake, there's only a few places we can go. And this river is really one of those places that we can enjoy, and it's really an asset that's just as wonderful as the lake, as the mountain, as our trails. And we've said a lot of things today about how important those things are. And I do believe that it's something that we can work on together, and I hope that the HOA is willing to listen, and we can listen, and we can figure out a solution. You know, in '83, they went ahead and built this condo complex, and in my opinion, if they were interested in having the trail there, which I would have been interested in having the trail there had I been one of those homeowners, I wouldn't have put that building quite where it is. It just doesn't make sense. But they did it anyway, and it's unfortunate because now, 38 years later, we're struggling with the solution. But we do have more engineering now, and we do have the ability to figure things out. So I'm hoping that we can come together with a solution. And I just want to share one little story. I recently came across in Colorado a woman who made the news because she was complaining that there were golf balls hitting her house. Well, she moved. She bought a house on a golf course, so naturally that might be an issue depending on where you are. And I'm sure, you know, she should have known that that was going to happen, but instead she started to fight against the golf club and wanting them to redo the whole golf club or the course so that she wouldn't get her house hit with golf balls. And my question was, why'd you buy the house? And you had to know that there was a way for you to, you had to make sacrifices in order to keep your house safe. Well, there's got to be a way to do it. And I would encourage the HOA, the homeowners, and I'm glad to see that we heard from a couple people tonight, but I hope that they realize that, you know, when you bought it, you agreed to something. And the developer, whether they're really part of it or not, it doesn't matter. It was something that was decided long ago, and I think we can work together, find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Riley. Further public comment on this item? Further public comment? We'll circle back to general public comments, but I'd like to address this issue first.
John, there is one person
Sorry,
online.
Michelle. Thank you. Thanks. We're also via WebEx this evening. I often forget. Thanks, Michelle.
No problem. So, Richard, in a moment, I'll let you unmute your mic, but also for those that are attending by phone, if you'd like to raise your hand, please hit *3 on your phone pad, and that will raise your hand. Richard, if you'd like to, you can unmute your mic and have the floor.
Thank you, Michelle, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Richard Hildner, 104 5th Street, Whitefish, and I'm speaking this evening in support of extending the bicycle pedestrian path along the Whitefish River from Veterans Memorial Bridge, the underpass there, to a connection point at Roundhouse Park. Specifically, I urge you to support and approve extending the path in front of the Riverbend condos. And after all, this is a city easement. I've had the privilege of participating on the Bike Ped Committee for 6 years. In that time, I believe the subject of this particular trail segment was frequently an item of discussion. And now's the time to connect the dots on this critical segment, as you've heard other speakers mention. Any argument that the path as proposed would create a hazard from drifting debris is, I believe, spurious. I've lived along the river less than a quarter of a mile downstream from the proposed section for 34 years and have seen these problematic debris only in the early years when lakeshore residents would cast off their unwanted docks into the spring runoff, and I haven't seen a dock float past for 20 years. I also live along the bike pedestrian path, and in fact, my front step is only 10 feet from the trail. Over the years, this has afforded me the opportunity to visit with locals, visitors from across the state and across the country, as well as from around the world. So I see that as an advantage. I've witnessed 2 generations of children learn to ride on the bike path, One of those generations were my own 2 children, and watched parents shepherd their children across Highway 93 or pack their bikes, trikes, and child carriers up the stairs to Miles Avenue. This is not only inconvenient, but it is dangerous. Now is the time to commit to connecting the dots and create a safe and user-friendly path that fulfills the goals and intent of the Bicycle Pedestrian Path Master Plan, and I encourage you to do so with the utmost dispatch. Thanks again for the opportunity to address you. Thanks for your service, thanks for your time, and thanks for the opportunity to address you via WebEx.
Thanks, Richard. Sorry I almost missed you.
It's okay.
So I'll turn it back to the council. I think our goal this evening is pretty straightforward. We either move this forward as presented or provide alternative direction to the bike ped. I'm just going to review very briefly what the request is on behalf of the bike ped committee. It's a threefold ask. Number one would be to direct the city attorney to re-engage the Riverbend Condo HOA in an effort to secure our easement. Number two, to direct the Parks Department to pursue a design that is least impactful to the river. And finally, once a design is finalized, to direct the city or the Public Works Department to apply to FWP for a Stream Permit Act 124 permit and other permits as required. With that said, that's the direction we need from the council. Who would like to begin? Frank.
I think the direction is perfect. I couldn't...
I'll take that as a motion and see if there's a second on the floor. It was seconded by Councilor Davis. Frank.
I've looked at this thing for a number of years. I've been a participant on the bike ped committee for the past couple of years. I came to this initially with a too hard pile approach to getting it done, too many hurdles. I don't believe that's true today, given the work that was done by the bike ped committee, in particular John Phelps, on the research that was done and the support both on paper and in history for this particular section of trail. I think it is time. I'd like to see it done. I think we have the wherewithal to make it happen. I think we can work with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and the Condo Association to come up with both a space and design that will suit both of them. And I think it's time. And I think the Condo Association, I appreciate their position that they don't want it in front of their house and between them and the river. That's not the deal they signed up for. That is not something that's been a surprise. I'm sorry, you bought a house and it just happens to be at the end of the runway. We're not moving the airport. So I think we can work with you. I think we want to work with you, but I think that's the direction we need to go.
Further comments from the council, briefly, please. Rebecca and then Ben.
Yeah, it's great to see so many people here speaking to this. I still have questions about the stability of the banks and what it will do to the condos, the foundations of the condos. We have been sued previously, and I tried to reach out to Angie about that, about people being threatened, but I don't think there were easements in place at the time. And then also, I just think since this is the first of 4 that we might be implementing, I want to make sure that we do it legally, because we have in the past not engaged the Flathead Conservation District, and we have had failures of the slopes. And so if we're going to go this route, then I really want to make sure we do it right without any damage to homeowners or to the riverbank, because we might get early warming and we have no idea what the river will do with high flow. So, but I do think it's really exciting, and I think the city also has some culpability with this too, to not figure this out for 38 years. So I think we should be working very closely with their attorney, the Homeowners Association attorney, to make sure that they're not the bad people in this. So I appreciate him coming too. Thank you.
Ben, I saw Dana's hand up real quickly. It might be in response to Rebecca's comments.
It actually isn't, but just a clarification that our Public Works Department generally designs the paths. Parks is responsible for maintenance, so I know that one of the requests was for the Parks Department to design that path. That would typically fall to our Public Works Department, so just a clarification.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dana. Ben?
I'll be brief, and I'll just say that there's some decisions up here that are pretty tough. This one to me is not really one of those. I know from my own experience on that trail, as well as from the testimony of folks here tonight, that this trail segment is extremely important and something that we need to follow up on right away. I also know, looking through the legal easement that we have, it is fairly obvious to me that that is intended to run right by the river. I think we need to stop talking about Miles Avenue, and we need to direct staff to get this proposal done without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Further comments? Andy?
Just a couple of really quick ones. I can tell you in 1983, when Gary Tallman built these, I'm pretty sure if Gary had not passed away this summer, we could get him in here today, and he would say, yeah, I'm pretty sure that trail was supposed to go by the river. I will also tell you in 1983, when Harry Berg was the building inspector in the city of Whitefish, I got a building permit that summer of 1983, for an addition to my first home that I owned here in Whitefish on Montana Avenue. I took my plans in for plan review. They were drawn on a paper napkin at the Great Northern Bar. So I'm pretty much guessing that when the building permit was issued, no one really even thought about it, even though the easement was there and they knew it. This community did trade in one piece of property, 0.36 acres with 61 feet of river frontage. We can all imagine what that's probably worth today. And an additional 0.4 of an acre, so a total of 0.4 acres were traded to Gary to make that project economically feasible, and in exchange for that, we got an easement. I agree with Mr. Adams 100%. The easement is not in question here. Unfortunately, the only thing that we didn't do at the time was nail down exactly where that easement was, but we did have language in there that alluded to that we didn't know exactly where it was going to be, but I think we'd always had envisioned that it would be on the river. And while I do feel for the homeowners there, I have to say sometimes in the community, some of us have to make some sacrifices, and the greater number of people are much, much better served by finishing out this trail. I walked through there yesterday. I go to the post office from my home there all the time. I do use it as transportation. It's key. I'll support the motion.
Thank you, Andy. Further comments from the council? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks everyone for coming this evening. We're going to circle back to public comment here in just 5 minutes after those that are exiting exit, so we can continue with our business. Thank you. We're almost to you, Mike. I bet you do. I bet you're sitting there saying, I just don't miss this. We're back in session, and we're going to go back to item number 4, communications from the public. Any other public communications unrelated to the Riverbend Trail are now welcome. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Councilors. My name is Katie William, 427 2nd Street West, good old Whitefish, Montana. I just accidentally swallowed my gum, that's awesome. Excuse me. I am here on behalf of the Whitefish Housing Authority as a current board member to address 2 items on your agenda today that are both under communications from the city manager. First off, the Whitefish Housing Authority would like to request the allocation of ARPA funds to help complete the Snow Lot Townhouse project that we have been working on for the past couple of years. We have identified a gap in funding, and the $2 million in ARPA funds would help close the gap, allowing us to continue to move the project along. Our Whitefish community is acutely aware of the strain COVID-19 has put on the ability for our Whitefish workforce to rent or buy homes that they can afford. Between record housing prices and an elevated rate of affordable rentals being sold over the past year and a half, local workers have been scrambling to find affordable rentals or homes to purchase, not only in Whitefish but in the valley. Whitefish Housing Authority believes that our current housing project, the Snow Lot Townhomes, will be a step toward meeting some of the housing needs in our community. As such, the Whitefish Housing Authority would like to use the ARPA funds to pay for the 8 units targeted for households in Whitefish, making an income not to exceed 80% AMI, which would help close the gap in our financing and make the project a reality. We anticipate to have the budget established in February after the last design phase, in which time we will go out to bid for the project. Per the city manager's report, you will see that once we have the final numbers for the budget, we'll be able to then go out to contract a bid if you do decide to authorize the funds to be used for this project, and we can nail down the actual costs needed. I thank you for your consideration for the use of ARPA funds. The second item on your agenda that I'd like to speak to is regarding the approval and updated site plan for the city-owned property on Monaghan Road. The Whitefish Housing Authority has been working with the Whitefish Community Foundation, donors Mark and Robin Jones, and additional donors to identify and bring forth a large workforce housing development for Whitefish. The project would run through Housing Whitefish, a 501c3 that has been formed by the Whitefish Housing Authority to provide affordable housing for our workforce. We have been working to identify parcels of land that could be used for the potential development, and the 8 acres owned by the city at Monaghan Road has been identified as a possible solution. We have discovered in our search that land is not only too expensive, land that is not too expensive, able to receive the needed infrastructure, and is properly zoned is very hard to come by in the 59937 zip code. The 8 acres on Monaghan Road can potentially check all of these boxes. The Whitefish Housing Authority would like to request your consideration and support to start the process to potentially identify the parcel for the housing development by approving the updated site plan and initiating the steps as described in your packet tonight. The Whitefish Housing Authority would like to thank you for your time, your consideration. We'd like to thank the city manager and city staff for their help and their time and efforts in working to identify these parcels, and we would like to thank the Whitefish Community Foundation for their efforts in trying to create workforce and affordable housing in our community. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Can also speak briefly about Housing Whitefish, just kind of since I brought it up, and I think that there'll be a few questions about that. And I can do that during my board report after public comment.
Thanks, Katie.
Perfect, thank you.
Good to see you. Mike.
Good evening. My name is Mike Jensen. I reside at 919 Dakota Avenue. I wanted to say how much I appreciate your willingness to serve in this capacity. I know that in my years of planning board and council, I never remember a 438-page agenda. I'm here tonight as a representative of Flathead Families for Responsible Growth. Later this evening, you are discussing a possible zone change to facilitate and encourage construction of workforce or affordable housing on city property near the treatment plant. I am here to support that endeavor and the use of this property. It's good that our city is willing to support our business community and their employees in this way. I encourage you to move forward with this effort. I know there will be strong support for this in the future from the community. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for coming down tonight. Linda.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Thank you for serving. I'm Linda Angrady, 785 Northwoods Drive. I'm also the president of the Whitefish Community Foundation, and I'm here also to speak on behalf of the Monaghan Road property. We were approached by donors and philanthropists Mark and Robin Jones, who are very interested in making a quality, affordable housing program go. We're talking about larger numbers here because that is the need in Whitefish. And we are working with the the Housing Whitefish to make this come about. And I hope you will consider this so that we can move ahead and see if this is a feasible project in rezoning and site plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Good evening. My name is Tim Salt. Deb, my wife, and I live at 533 Texas Avenue since 2006. We've also provided written comments tonight, so I'll try to keep my comments too brief. We're speaking on the Texas Avenue reconstruction project. We chose to live in this neighborhood because we wanted to live in the city, but we wanted to live in a neighborhood that had a more rural and natural character. Big mature trees, open spaces, wide beautiful vistas, and beautiful dark night skies. We also purchased the adjoining lot at the corner of Texas and Denver to help ensure that rural natural character and to protect our views of Big Mountain. We have been involved in the planning process for this project from the beginning. Like our neighbors to the north in the preserve subdivision, we were initially opposed to the improvements on Texas Avenue, but we chose to work with the city and the staff and the contractor in an attempt to achieve the city's goal of improving the road while at the same time protecting the rural character of the neighborhood. In doing so, we were hopeful that we would be able to come forward tonight in full support of the proposal to be presented by the Public Works Director. We feel strongly that the proposal with the meandering trail in the existing power line right-of-way on the west side of the road and the reduced road width will go a long ways towards maintaining the rural character of the neighborhood by limiting the number of mature trees removed and minimizing the cookie-cutter look to the project. We recommend to the City Council, we commend the city for listening to our concerns and accommodating them in this proposal. But we still have one major unanswered concern: streetlights. Typical streetlights used in similar projects in the city will destroy the night sky experiences in our neighborhood. Have you ever sat on your porch and watched the fireworks on Big Mountain, or watched the sky dancing during a Northern Lights display? We do, and we hope to continue to do so. The proposal before us tonight calls for decorative lighting. Our beautiful neighborhood does not need to be decorated. Common arguments for streetlights are crime reduction and driver safety. There are conflicting studies on the effects of streetlights in reducing crimes. They may be effective in reducing crime in an inner city environment, but this is a quiet rural neighborhood with no crime to speak of in the first place. As for driver safety, it is my experience that most people drive with their headlights on after dark. The only plausible argument for streetlights other than being decorative is to light the meandering path to be constructed on the west side of the road. We believe there's a better way to do that than the typical city streetlight that will also go a long ways toward protecting the rural character and the night skies. We recommend installing bollard-style lights along the path, as was done at the intersection of Highway 93 and State Park Road. The lower level light will effectively light the path with minimum light pollution. While we were initially opposed to this project, we chose to work with the city to offer meaningful input at every step of the process, to minimize the effects of this project on the character of our neighborhood in an effort to develop a proposal we could support. If this simple and proven mitigation is added to this proposal, we would offer our full support to this project. Thank you for consideration.
Thanks very much for your comments. Dick.
Dick Zollner, 1365 Orman Road. I'm here to talk about the housing on Monaghan, and I'm not against affordable housing. I worked with so many guys that need it. I just had a hot water tank go out today, was talking with the plumbers, they laughed when they talk about affordable housing. It really isn't affordable anymore. I just bought some insulative sheets, 20 bucks a sheet for 1-inch board. But anyway, on this project down there, I attended almost all the growth policy meetings. And I think if you look in the growth policy, it says there is no development that should have taken place out there. You've already allowed one until a connector road is in. And if you're going to do this, if we spend all that time and money on a growth policy, then I think we ought to follow what we had. And I know the hang up for the city going up through Barnes's, and there's a bald eagle's nest, and you guys will probably never get a road in there. And otherwise, you're going to have to go and cross the river somewhere. But that's in the growth policy, and I think we ought to abide by it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dick.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ruben Castron, here tonight representing Citizens for a Better Flathead, 135 South Main Street. We submitted written comments earlier today, so I'll also keep my verbal comments short. Also speaking on the issue of the updated site plan on Monaghan Road, we wholeheartedly support this updated site plan for reasons previously expressed, but believe it should be slightly amended to include the possibility of a central recycling facility located there. I'd like to remind the Council that earlier this calendar year, in discussing the future of recycling services for the city, 2 options were brought up. One was for curbside recycling, and one was for a centralized recycling drop-off facility. While recently the curbside recycling proposal has been what has been moving forward, contract hasn't been signed, city code has not yet been updated, and so until that time, we believe we should keep all options on the table. At the May 17th, 2021 Council work session, the option for the centralized recycling facility was discussed, and the maps on the back of the comments, which we submitted earlier, specified it be located on this property on Monaghan Road in what is currently in the proposed plan being allocated for Parks and Rec. The site, 30,000 square feet or 0.7 of an acre. Its inclusion in the site plan very minimally affects the intent of this proposal, and so we believe it can be included and nothing would really be affected. So we encourage you to do that, keep all the options on the table, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruben. Hey, Chris.
Good evening. My name is Chris Schustrom. I live at 504 Spokane Avenue. First, had a quick comment about the Spokane Avenue water main replacement project and the subsequent overlay that's going to take place. Craig is always great about this, but I wanted to just put a reminder out there that anytime there's a cover that's going to be installed in the roadway or a manhole cover moved or adjusted because of the repaving project, those items should be out of the wheel path. You can see when you drive out East 2nd Street that that's an interesting ride, and Craig and the contractors did a great job of making sure that that's not the case on State Park Road. So just a shout out for those covers out of the wheel path. I also coordinate the Whitefish winter decorations as part of the Whitefish Shines Committee, as generations before our committee's generation have done. For over 70 years, this all-volunteer project, supported only by community donations and undertaken by community volunteers, has beautified our community for the winter season. Organization and planning for the project, for those who are not familiar with it, those things take place throughout the year, and we do the actual work on the decorations beginning late summer through the fall, until we will hang the decorations this year on Sunday, November 21st. And we always welcome and need volunteers to help us with that. Community involvement is really key. Volunteers should meet at 8 a.m. at the corner of 3rd Street and Central Avenue downtown and bring gloves and dress for the weather. And really wanted to thank the city for being an excellent partner to our organization in this long-time project. And we look forward to seeing everyone who can help out on Sunday morning, the 21st of November. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for all your work on the decorations as usual. Jerry.
Hi, Jerry Dunker, 84 Army Road, part of the Trailview development that's just north of the Monaghan site you're talking about. I just wanted to say we strongly support that site for affordable housing for a lot of the same reasons we chose our land out there for our development. And we had a great partnership with the city to upsize all the utilities and services, and they're right there ready to go. So I think it's a perfect site for what they're proposing there. And as far as there was some stuff in here about odor, I'm out there almost every day. I talked to all the homeowners, and it really has not been an issue. 2 summers ago, it's a little bit of an issue, but that was taken care of. And now with the new plant, it has not been an issue at all. So just wanted to speak on that. Thank you.
Good to hear. Thanks, Jerry. Rhonda.
Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Ave. I wanted to comment on the 2 housing items at the end of the agenda. As you know, because you appointed me, I serve on the Strategic Housing Committee, and we have been working a long time to get some achievements, and they're starting to all fall into place, which is fabulous. I was on the original snow lot committee, and I did attend the open house last month for the snow lot, and it looks great. It's very much in keeping with the original designs that were developed with the charrette with all the neighbors, and they're going to be really nice townhomes that will be wonderful to live in and own. And so I really hope that you can allocate some of the ARPA money for that lower income range for the snow lot homes. I think it's a great use of the funds, and I commend the city for identifying that. And then as far as the Monaghan Road, same thing. It's great that the city has that large parcel, 88 acres, I think, and to be able to use 8 of them for affordable housing in a location that is close to town and along the bike path is really great. And so I really encourage you to go ahead and follow or start that process, because those are both wonderful solutions and really needed, as you all know. So thank you very much. And I also want to comment that when we got the easement from Gary Tallman in 1983, our children were in 5th and 6th grade, and I remember standing in the old city hall basement and saying, please do this soon so my kids can ride their bikes to the beach before they go to college. Now, our daughter Sarah has a kid in 5th grade. So I'm saying, please do this soon so my grandson can ride his bike to the beach before he goes to college. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda. Further comments from the public? Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Katie.
Hello again, Katie Williams on behalf of Whitefish Housing Authority. Just wanted to give you guys a brief update. I know it's been a while since we've probably been before you. The Whitefish Housing Authority actually held a open house for the snow lot based on the initial designs that we have received from our architect, which is Encompass. We had about half a dozen people who showed up. We had posted it in the paper and had a notice on site at the snow lot, and everyone primarily gave very good feedback. We were able to keep a lot of the same design standards that had been initially talked about at our original charrette a couple years ago. So we're moving forward with that. We'll have our final designs done by December, and then the budget should be done by the end of January. We'll call it February because you never know what happens. From then, once we have the budget approved, we'll then discuss with the city as to if we do get the ARPA funds, we'll discuss as to where they will be line item marked for the specific units, and then from there we'll go out to a bid process. Additionally, we are working on changing our WALT, which is the Whitefish Area Land Trust 501c3, which we have been doing business as and registered with the state of Montana since June of 2020 as Housing Whitefish. We are finalizing the bylaws and board documents so that it will have its own operating separate board. It will be a separate nonprofit 501c3 that people can donate and use that tax exempt donation, that write-off, excuse me. One of the reasons for doing this is because the Housing Authority cannot receive 501c3 designation, and so as such, it's kind of hamstring some of these large donors that would potentially want to give money but still reap the benefits of the tax write-off. We are also looking for board members for Housing Whitefish. Just my little plug. If you would like to put someone's name in the hat and push them, send me a text message, give me a call, smoke signals, whatever works, and I'll go and try and recruit them. We have a notice in the paper, we have a notice on Facebook, and we also have a notice on our website. The idea behind Housing Whitefish is to form public-private partnerships to develop workforce and affordable housing in perpetuity and utilize it to really run with the housing development, while the Whitefish Housing Authority can also not only be a pass-through for certain government-funded projects, but also for any donations from the city, and then pass through down to Housing Whitefish. I will be leaving this meeting and going virtual right after this, so if you guys have any questions during the city manager's comments, I will be online to answer those questions on behalf of the Housing Authority. I just have to pack, so. And I did not anticipate your presentation going so long. So yeah, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks, Katie. Board reports from the council. Not seeing any, we'll move on to item 6, which is our consent agenda. You have the October 18th, both special and regular meeting minutes. Any edits or additions? Motion, please.
I would move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion carries unanimously, which brings us finally onto our first and only public hearing tonight, ordinance number 21-17, an ordinance amending Title I of our zoning regulations, Chapter 2, zoning districts, Chapter 3, special provisions, Section 34, medical marijuana, and Chapter 9, definitions of the Whitefish City Code, and this will be on a first reading. Good evening, Dave.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So as most of you know, with the passing of Citizen Initiative I-190 back in November 2020, marijuana sales for adult use are now legal in Montana. Anyone currently with a medical dispensary license can open an adult use store starting January 1st of 2022. So the city is looking at revising our regulations in order to accommodate that before that deadline. We had 2 work sessions with the City Council, August 2nd and October 4th, and you guys gave us direction on some text amendments and how we would sort of organize that and then what zoning districts would be appropriate. And so we did bring that to the planning board at their last meeting. So in general, we're going to add definitions for marijuana, marijuana cultivation, marijuana dispensaries, marijuana facilities, marijuana manufacturing, marijuana products, and marijuana testing or research laboratories. And then we also developed some guidelines, as most of these developments will either be administrative conditional use or a full conditional use. So anyone that wants to put in one of these facilities will need to meet these criteria. So one of the standards would be they would meet state law and other city requirements, including any conditions of approval. They'd be prohibited within 500 feet of schools and churches, which is a state requirement. As you can see on the screen, in the downtown area, because of the location of several churches as well as Central School, there are a bunch of segments of downtown which have the blue areas along the street, which they would not be able to be located, and then the City Council at their work session suggested an additional restriction in front of Central School on Spokane Avenue between Railway and 2nd Street. So that has been added to that as well. Cities can be more restrictive than the state requirements, but not less restrictive. And then additionally, there's some language in there that would prohibit any dispensary from locating within 150 feet door to door from another dispensary located in that same zoning district in order to avoid clustering. There's some specific language that would require tasteful storefront buildings that blend in with other storefronts, so they would not look out of place, and there'd be limitations on window coverings as well as security devices such as metal bars or grates or things like that on the windows that you might see in other states where they do allow these types of facilities. There's also some language that would provide a notarized authorization from the property owner if someone is going to do that. So if someone's leasing, that the property owner be aware that that use is happening there. And then if there's any cultivation, they'd have to be within secure buildings unless they're located in agricultural zones. And then in those places, they have to meet state requirements, so they're not visible from public streets or things like that. And then we have specific language with regard to safety and nuisance control, as well as odor control and security. And then any signage has to meet our requirements as well as state regulations. And so these zoning text amendments, as you might know, we currently have a restriction on medical dispensaries within city limits. So that would remove that, and then it would permit or administratively permit or conditionally permit those uses in different zones. So in general, the sales or dispensaries would be allowed with a conditional use permit, administrative conditional use permit in the WB1, WB2, and WB3 commercial zones, and that was at council direction that you wanted to see those zoning districts have those things permitted in there to allow them in different areas, and then as well as the industrial zones such as the WB4 and WI and WBSD. Downtown, there would be a restriction on any formula stores in case there were some that met those restrictions in our code, and then in the B1, any formula retail such as that would be a conditional use, as other formula businesses are in the WB1 currently. As far as manufacturing and testing facilities, they'd be allowed in industrial zones, as well as the WB2, and then again, outdoor cultivation, something that's permitted under agricultural standards in the WA and WCR zoning districts, which would be subject to the state requirements. Just a refresher on the Marijuana Act, House Bill 701, which was signed on May 18th, that further refined the program from what was approved. So someone that has a dispensary can also open a recreational adult use dispensary, and they can be in the same location. Again, they're only open to people 21 years of age, or unless they have a medical card, which is 18 or older. Those requirements with the distance from schools and churches of 500 feet are in the state law. And we just mirrored that exactly. If somebody wants to put in a school or a church after a dispensary is in place, that wouldn't affect that location. So just in general, I'm not going to go over all the specifics of the kit tax amendments, but again, we did add that requirement that it wouldn't be allowed between on Spokane Avenue between Railway Street and East First Street, 150 feet apart from each other, measured in a straight line from the center of the nearest public entrance. Again, a facade that blends in with the design, style, and appearance of adjacent storefronts, including signage, security measures, and lighting. And then anything needs to be reviewed by the Architectural Review Committee, has to be if it's required. And then again, the window signs, in our downtown WB3, we have a restriction that only 20% of a window can be covered by signage or other obscure things that would obscure the window, the view into the things in there. And so that same requirement would be carried over to all dispensaries, so they can't be covered or made opaque in any way in their windows. And then any security bars or metal screens or grates would not be visible. So that pretty much covers all the requirements that we put in there. I'm not going to go through all the details of it. Staff did recommend approval of these changes. It did go to the City Planning Board a couple weeks ago on October 11th. I don't think that's the right date. I think it was the 19th. Anyway, it's a typo on the staff report. So we did have a public presentation there. There were 5 people that spoke at public comment. Rhonda Fitzgerald questioned whether the sales should be allowed in the WB1 and the WB2 zones. And again, that was put in those zones at the council's request during the work sessions. Gary Stevens was opposed to all marijuana sales. Then we had 3 people, Jessica Owen, Ed Doctor, and Robert Marriott, that all supported the regulations as drafted. The planning board did have a public hearing on that, and then they made a motion to approve it, which was unanimously supported by the members of the planning board. Be glad to try to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave on his staff report? Rebecca?
Dave, on these comments that we got, I'm not sure who Ian Stewart of Libertas Green Holdings is. Is that someone local, or is it just...
It's a national organization that lobbies on behalf of marijuana businesses. And
that's what I thought.
Yep.
Okay, but in here they talk about extending it to 300 feet from 150 feet to avoid clustering. Is that...
You know, we looked at that. Our downtown is so dense with the way the blocks are set up that, you know, the whole entire block is 300 feet. And so basically 150, if one's in the middle of a block at 150 feet, there wouldn't be allowed to be another one on another block, just because of the way our streets are oriented. I mean, that's a national standard that some places use that, just have much larger downtowns and much larger areas to work with.
Okay.
Just the way things are limited as it is with the restrictions that we have with the existing schools and churches.
Right.
150 feet just seemed to make more sense.
And then the other thing I hadn't thought about was the comment about banking, and that we need to be aware that it will mean for operators, they will need to have armored cars do pickups if the local bank won't take deposits. I mean, I never would have thought about that. Do you think we should add anything about that?
I mean, that's something that it's up to the businesses to deal with. We don't tell banks they have to do that, so I mean, it's not something that we can regulate through zoning.
But if this is if this is the law as of January, I don't see why the banks wouldn't take money.
I think that's a federal issue.
Okay, all right, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Further questions for Dave? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on ordinance 21-17. Is there any public comment this evening? Chris.
Hello again. My name is Chris Schustrom. I live at 504 Spokane Avenue. I am concerned about spreading small retail into other zones where it wasn't intended. And I'm concerned about honoring the intent of the specific zones where marijuana sales or sales of any small retail could be located. I'd ask the council to allow sales of small retail only in the WB3 zone as intended by the zoning. And I'd also ask the council to seriously consider an overlay for marijuana sales. While it's recently legalized, I mean, gambling is legalized, and the city council years ago felt compelled to have an overlay to have a specific area where that was allowed, so it didn't spread throughout our community in areas where it wasn't intended. It's possible that by allowing small retail to locate in the WB2, that could cause more small retail to want to locate in the WB2, which would be contrary to our downtown master plan and our growth policy identifying the downtown WB3 district as the general business district for retail in our community. And I think that's a real danger. And so I think that's everything I have. Thanks very much. There have been many hours put in this, maintaining the intent of the WB3 and the vitality of our downtown and not allowing retail to sort of sprawl out. And whether it's sales of marijuana or any other small retail sales, I think it applies equally. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Further comment this evening?
Hello, Council. My name is Michael Medlin. I want to thank you for your service. I'm a 12-year resident and local business owner here in Whitefish. I own an Aero shuttle. I'm married and have 3 kids. I commend and support the Safe Access Ordinance as drafted by the staff and recommended by the City Planning Board. I'd also like to add that medical marijuana has proven to be a safe herbal alternative to pharmaceuticals, and now adult use marijuana has proven to add billions to the economy, create hundreds of thousands of jobs, and generated enormous tax revenues. And now regulation has made marijuana use safer through required testing, through labeling, and now child-proof packaging. It's been proven that marijuana is less harmful than alcohol, and it's agreed that adults should have a right to use it if they wish. I'd like to thank the council for being open-minded and allowing safe access in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Further public testimony on this item? Michelle, anyone call in this evening? Oh, sorry, Rhonda. Go ahead.
Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer. So I did make a comment at the planning board, but it was the planning board meeting that had like 400 people. And I don't think my comments actually accurately were conveyed in your packet. My concern is that we have over and over and over again looked at the relationship between B2 and B3 zones. and the B2 zone, which is a secondary business district intended for businesses that require a large display or large storage. Only a few kinds of businesses, and we've revisited this over and over again because there is some sort of gravitational pull toward people wanting to do small retail in the B2, which is how you get strip malls and sprawl. And so we have had to come back, circle back over and over again and say, no, we don't want small retail in the B2. B3 is the general business district where all that kind of activity can occur. And I don't think that marijuana is any different than sunglasses or any other retail product that requires a small display area, as we all know. You know, it's expensive and small. So I do not think it belongs in the B2, as many other things don't belong in the B2, which we have discussed over and over again. And I would really urge you to consider what allowing one type of small retail in that zone will do. You know, people develop strip malls and then they get little retail tenants and so on and so forth. And that's how you get Anywhere USA. So I would really urge you to continue to control small retail as being appropriate in the B3 zone. We just finished a whole Highway 93 South Corridor plan where there was a lot of discussion about increasing the permissible retail uses in the B2 corridor, and the committee resolved that they should not expand the types of retail uses in the B2. So I just think it belongs in the B3, and an overlay, if you so choose, I would suggest the railway district would be optimum, but be that as it may, it doesn't belong in the B2, which is meant for large display and large storage and large parking areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda. Further comment tonight on this item? I'll go ahead and close the public
John,
hearing.
can I see if Ed wanted to? He kind of raised his hand, but
Okay.
he lowered it. Ed, if you would like to speak, please unmute your mic. On the WebEx. I think he decided not to speak.
Okay, I'll turn it back to council and close the public hearing. I would prefer a motion one way or another. Move the meeting along. Rebecca?
Make a motion to adopt staff report WZTA 21-02.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Fury. Rebecca, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Rhonda and Chris, but as you're saying that, I'm picturing where we have retail already, and I guess I'm hesitant to change it at this late date when it's already been through so much public process. And I'm really hoping that it doesn't become a problem for our city, but there's quite a few provisions in place to help guide the transition, I guess I would say. But thank you for being always thoughtful about how we grow.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further comments from the council? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously, which brings us on to item 8, communications from Craig Workman, our Public Works Director, in consideration to approve initial design of Texas Avenue reconstruction project. Craig.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as I'm sure you're all aware, the Edgewood Place and Texas Avenue reconstruction project is the current job we're working on in the resort tax priority lists. These two collector streets do serve a vital role in the city's transportation network, providing access to homes and businesses on the north side of town. City Council awarded the engineering contract for the project to Robert Pesch and Associates back in September of 2020, and construction began last summer on Edgewood Place. Since then, the Public Works staff has been working on the preliminary design of Texas Avenue. One of the highest priorities of this job is the enhancements of driver and pedestrian safety that will be realized through roadway improvements, street lighting, intersection improvements, and improved pedestrian accommodations. Staff has also been working hard to balance the desires of residents to maintain the rural character and quality of the neighborhood with the long-term vision and growth projections for the corridor. Public outreach for the group of projects began with a website that was launched last fall. Since then, we have sent 7 newsletters, held 5 public outreach events, and had numerous individual meetings with residents interested in this project. I feel we're at a comfortable place in our design efforts to present our preliminary recommendations for the Texas Avenue portion of the project for your approval. We will then plan, at the request of the public, to have an additional public meeting to present the final designs prior to requesting authorization from council to go to bid. So attached to the report, which is in your packet, are several figures providing an overview of the initial proposed layout, a proposed schedule, the current estimated budget, and a summary of written public comment received to date. I should mention it's not everything received to date, it's everything since we last presented this in order to move forward with Texas Avenue. So phase 1 of the project includes construction of Edgewood from Colorado Avenue to the eastern city limits. We've talked about some of the delays that we've had on this project. Construction was scheduled to begin in July, but difficulties in pipe procurement led to several weeks of delay in starting that construction. So at this point, our goal is basically to complete all the roadway construction from Wisconsin to Texas on Edgewood. So that's everything basically between the curbs. We'll then open the roadway for regular vehicular traffic this winter, and that'll allow us to get all the sidewalk and driveway aprons and restoration and landscaping completed. Hopefully continuing this winter with that work as long as weather permits, but we'll be able to finish that project with the roadway open. So then the remaining work on phase 1, which is essentially everything from Texas Avenue on Edgewood to the eastern city limits, would be done next spring. Then our goal would be to begin Texas Avenue shortly thereafter in mid-June. We're calling that phase 2 of the project. I guess it's really phase 3 since phase 1 is going to get split up a little bit, but we're estimating 120 days to build Texas Avenue. So if we can begin that in mid-June, it'll be completed about a year from now in October of 2022. To avoid similar construction delays, I am recommending that the city go through a pre-procurement process to purchase the pipe materials for Texas Avenue, and that would be something we would do shortly after this meeting. We could pretty quickly quantify the materials that we'll need, and then we'll do a statute will require that we do a small bid package and publicly advertise that. So that is part of this recommendation. So several things to consider with the preliminary design recommendations, starting with roadway profile and active transportation. The city's approved transportation calls for Texas Avenue to be an urban collector, and according to our engineering standards, that's a 32-foot wide roadway with curb and gutter. The current road is only 22 feet wide, and staff has determined that the typical collector roadway of 32 feet would be way too wide for this road. So upon evaluating the existing and projected vehicular traffic, we're recommending a reduced width of 26 feet for this roadway. We think this reduction will help calm traffic while still providing sufficient room to efficiently move vehicles. The reduced width will also help maintain as much boulevard as possible with the existing power poles on the west side of the roadway. There were numerous requests from the public to bury those power lines. Of course, that's the primary power that feeds Big Mountain, and so the estimates from Flathead Electric simply just made it impossible to fit into this project. Staff is also recommending no construction on Texas Avenue north of Denver. This is based on what I would call overwhelming outreach and the desire of those residents north of Denver. I should mention that this staff report was sent out to everybody on our mailing list last Wednesday, and so I haven't heard any comments from those folks north of Denver opposing that, and nor did we hear any at our last public meeting when that was made a recommendation. As with Edgewood Place, staff is recommending a vertical face curb on Texas Avenue to control drainage, provide more consistent and easier snow removal, access control, and driver safety improvements. The Connect Whitefish Bike and Ped Master Plan recommends a shared use path on this roadway. Staff looked at options to construct the path on both sides, and upon evaluation, it's our recommendation to construct this path on the west side of the road. We think that doing so will maximize the clearance between power poles and the vehicles. It will allow for a meandering path between the power lines. It will simplify the proposed drainage system, maximize connectivity to the existing and future sidewalks on the west side of Texas, minimizing the number of crosswalks on Texas, and save more trees along the east side of the roadway. Stormwater management, of course, is another one of our key priorities on this project. We are recommending that a storm sewer system be installed in Texas that will connect to the recently constructed storm sewer in Edgewood Place. Doing so will allow the system to serve future growth in this watershed, and discharging the water to that swale that we've talked about before west of Wisconsin Avenue will help meet water quality standards. Water and sanitary sewer, there is an existing 18-inch water main that runs from Edgewood Place all the way up to Reservoir Road. The pipe was installed in 2007 to serve as a secondary transmission main from the water plant and serve as a backup to that cast iron water main that runs under Wisconsin Avenue. And there's also an 8-inch water main, or excuse me, sanitary sewer main that was installed in 91. So neither of these utilities require work, but of course they'll both need to be protected, and there could likely be some new fire hydrants and valve boxes, manholes, and things like that that'll be evaluated for replacement. Lighting and landscaping. So as with past road reconstruction projects, we are recommending this corridor be upgraded to include decorative lighting. We feel the upgraded lighting is necessary to promote safety and year-round active transportation on the upgraded roadway. Like the recent reconstruction of Summers State Park and soon to be completed Edgewood, this project will incorporate our typical dark sky compliant LED lights. Of course, these are recommended in the Western Boulevard to focus light downward onto the path as well as the roadway. We feel as staff that illuminating the road with our standard pedestrian scale decorative lights will reduce the possibility of collisions on the shared use path with both objects and other users, make deformities and path unevenness visible, preventing falls and crashes, allow users to recognize potential threats to their security. We have had numerous concerns from residents on Texas Avenue about security issues and requests for lighting well prior to this project. So we do believe that there are potential security issues out there and possible crime. Also help to calm traffic by providing motorists with a visual cue that they're in more of an urban area. So as with past projects, the Public Works Department will also work with Parks and Rec and the Tree Committee to determine a tree planting plan in the boulevard. We are recommending more of a typical, street tree type setup or plan for this project. This project will not require nearly the same tree removal as Edgewood. So property owners will be given the opportunity to adopt a tree, which will give them a chance to select a tree of their choice on the approved species list. Traffic control and construction, I think, as with past projects, the project will be bid with traffic control plans that have to be adhered to. Our plan with Texas Avenue would be to close the roadway to through traffic during construction. This will allow residents that live on the roadway to access their properties but prevent other vehicles from driving through the construction site. We're also recommending a four-way controlled stop intersection at Texas and Denver and a three-way stop at Texas and Cedar. In terms of finances, the project is slated to be paid for by resort taxes. The original estimated cost for the entire group of projects, both Texas and Edgewood, is $5 million. And we're currently estimating final project to come in at about $4.6 million. So we had a fairly aggressive bidder on Edgewood, and we're hoping to see the same competition on Texas. So at this point, the fiscal '22 budget is $1.9 million, and I'm recommending that we include $2.4 million in the resort tax budget for next fiscal year to complete Texas. So based on the guidance and direction received from council to date, the resort tax committee, and the public outreach, I do respectfully request authorization to proceed with the final design, of Texas Avenue. And this would include the pre-procurement of any necessary pipe materials. Upon completion, final designs will be presented to the council for authorization to bid.
Any questions for Craig on his staff report? Rebecca? Microphone, please, Rebecca. Thanks.
Could we add in the request to change the lighting to be similar to the State Park Road, or did you say no to that?
I'm not recommending bollard lights. The State Park Road, it was a slightly different scenario. We used bollard lights on that short section on the cutoff between Highway 93 to State Park Road, where there are a number of tall existing highway lights along 93 that help to illuminate that area. The bollard lights were installed there really just to provide path guidance. They don't provide, they don't illuminate the path to the same extent as a typical pedestrian scale street light. They really just provide guidance as to where the path is. And we thought in that area there was enough ambient light from other lights, from other projects, that we didn't need them. So staff is recommending our typical 14-foot tall dark sky compliant streetlights for this entire corridor. Of course, council is more than able to direct us in another direction, but it is our recommendation that we do include those lights.
And if the citizens come up with another type of lighting, could they present that to you during this process? Or are you just going to say no?
I think it's been presented, and
you're saying no?
Staff
Okay.
is not recommending that we follow that request.
All right. We just like happy campers. Thank you.
Further questions for Craig on his staff report? Or can I have a motion, please? Frank?
I would move to approve the initial design of the Texas Avenue reconstruction project, but amending the lighting recommended by staff to be replaced by bollard-style lighting along the path or its equivalent.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second for discussion.
Seconded by Councilor Norton. Frank, would you like to speak to your motion?
It is my pet peeve.
We know.
I know you know. And so I think I am glad that Ted showed up this evening to give further voice from the community that we don't need to project on every single project our standard lighting package. And so I think it's a reasonable request, and quite frankly, I think it's the right one, and so that's why I made the motion.
Thank you, Frank. Further discussion on the motion? Andy?
I guess a question. I agree with Frank.
Microphone, please.
Turn it off. Oh, gee whiz, there we go. I do agree with Frank, and I think we are transitioning out of the urban setting into a more rural setting on Texas for sure. And if we look to the future, we probably don't see in the near term any development to the east there, knowing how the property ownership currently exists. But I do understand staff's concerns, and I do understand that there are others in the neighborhood that probably feel differently than Salts. So I guess my thought would be, we're going to final design, can we design it both ways? Can we look at what the cost would be by doing that, and then have the neighborhood weigh in on a final design, and then we make the decision at that point? Is that a huge problem, Craig?
No, the bollards actually use the same bases that the 14-foot poles do. They use the same power. I think they have a different bolt pattern, so they attach differently to the bases, but I think that we could likely design the project open-ended so that we could wait to make a final determination on exact lighting. I think that the correspondence we received from Deb and Tim Salt was to only do the bollard lights north of Aspen Grove, knowing that, you know, as you drive Texas from Edgewood to Denver, I don't know that you necessarily see a specific transition at Aspen Grove, but I think they identified that as a possible kind of transitionary zone. We could easily, the lighting design portion of this project is the least of my worries. I mean, we could pretty much wrap it up in a couple days. So we could go back to the public at our last final meeting and try and get some additional, you know, input from them to bring back to you for a final request to authorize bidding.
So in other words, postpone this for this evening?
No, I guess what I'd like to do is still authorize us to go to final design, but when we come back to request to bid the project, come in with a final recommendation on exactly what lights go where.
Is that okay with the first?
I can handle that, that's fine.
How about the second? Okay. Is that enough clarity, direction?
Yeah,
on the
helps.
motion? Okay.
Yep.
Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks very much, Craig, but we're still with you on item 8B, consideration to award an engineering contract for the Spokane Avenue Water Main Replacement Project.
Excellent. I'll kind of cut to the chase on this one. I think everybody's aware that we recently discovered that MDT is planning to do some pavement and crosswalk improvements. In order to do those pavement and crosswalk improvements, we need to put a new water main underground. So in accordance with City Council Consultant Selection Policy, we did authorize a selection committee. Let's see, where am I on my staff report? So that was on the September 20th council meeting. We appointed a rating panel and a selection panel. We did advertise for bids. Those were due on October 1st. We received a total of 8 proposals. I tried to beat it. AE2S, HDR, Great West, KLJ, Morrison Merrily, Robert Pesh & Associates, TD&H, and WGM Group. The proposals were reviewed by the rating panel, and 6 firms were actually selected for an interview. I think this really clearly shows how fortunate we are to have so many skilled consultants here in the Flathead Valley and throughout Montana, and many with a history of completing successful projects in Whitefish. But after the interviews, which were all completed on the 20th of October, it was our unanimous recommendation, and so that selection committee was Rebecca, myself, Karin Hilding, and Neil Desort, recommend that we award the project to Morrison Merrily. I think all of the consultants really did demonstrate their ability to successfully complete the project, but Morrison Merrily really stood out. They have a full team of local engineers dedicated to municipal projects and just recently completed the water plant for us, which was a great job. Excellent understanding of the project. promise we won't put any valve boxes in the wheel path. And I think beyond that, we're in good shape. So the project is estimated to cost $1.95 million, which will be covered by both local funds and American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so based on that, I am respectfully recommending that a contract be awarded to Morrison Merrily for the Spokane Avenue water main replacement project design, and the city manager be authorized to execute that contract.
Thanks, Craig. Any questions for Craig, or can I have a motion? Ben?
Just one question, Craig. Just curious, why does this not get done concurrently with the highway reconstruction? So we only close the highway twice? Or excuse me, once?
Once?
With the paving?
Yeah, I guess why is this separate project from what's proposed by MDT?
Well, are you talking about just their repaving project or the future downtown highway project? So the project that they just had the open house for a couple weeks ago is, I would say, 5 years out at its soonest.
Okay.
And they don't have, so what they're doing with that project right now is just trying to come up with a typical section that the city and MDT can agree on. Once then, they call this the other phase. It's an OT phase. It's not even a preliminary design phase. So if we can get through this study with something that the city and MDT agree on, then they have to nominate it for design, then they have to nominate it for construction. So it would probably be about 5 years out at its soonest. What we heard from them just last summer, like in August, was the condition of Spokane Avenue is in such grave state of disrepair that it won't last that long, and they need to do something sooner. So their goal is to just mill and overlay the existing roadway in its existing location next summer. And so we're doing, in an effort to get ahead of that, we're trying to get the water main replaced. We always intended to replace the water main with that future, highway reconstruction, but if they repave the road and it's another 5 or 7 years, we're gonna wind up digging it up 20 times between now and then. So it's not possible to do it in conjunction with that project.
So you would put the main in before they repave next summer?
Correct, yeah. Once we're done with the water main work, they'd come in and do the mill and overlay, and that would probably be a 3 or 4 day project, which they'd likely do at night. Our water main reconstruction is gonna take 8 to 10 weeks to do. So, I mean, it'd be similar to any other construction project that the city does, where we do all of the underground utilities first and then build the road.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Further questions, or can I have a motion, please? Ryan?
I would move to award the engineering contract to Morrison and Merrily for the Spokane Avenue water main replacement project.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion? All those in favor, please. Okay.
Also, after this project, which is supposed to be done by May 31st, then the MDT is doing an ADA project with curb cuts. Is that correct, Craig?
There's, I think, 10 or 12 corners throughout the corridor that they need to reconstruct. So it's really just some curb ramp replacements. But our goal will be to have them do those replacements after we get past with the water main.
Oh, yeah.
So that when we're all done in May, they're ready to repave the road in early June, and we get a new road for next summer.
And people that live or own property along here will have a new service to their property, which might be around $6,000.
Well, I mean, the city will pay for all of the work up to the property line. So if the property owners wish to continue a water service from the new curb stop that we install to their home, then there could be some cost that they incur.
Then we
They
might
wouldn't
not
be
know what it is.
required to, but
And we did ask all of the engineering firms if they would retain trees. So there's, I forget, is it horizontal boring?
Yep.
That's what you call it. So there's a method where you go like this underground to get in for service connection. So we're hoping that the trees can be preserved. So it was really a great experience. You know, I was telling Craig and Karen and Neil, we have been so fortunate to have such great professionals build our town for us, and it was a really hard decision. So I loved it. Anyways, I'm in favor of it.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further comments from the council? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Craig. We'll move on to item 9, communications from our city manager. Dana, anything additional to report on?
I think just the one item that we do need to discuss is the dates for the appointment of a new judge. As I shared in my manager's report, the city council will be responsible for appointing a judge for the next 2-year term, assuming the election results tomorrow will result in either Judge Heilman's approval by the voters or not, as long as there's not enough write-ins. So right now, resumes and cover letters are due on November 10th. Ideally, we would schedule the interviews November 16th or 17th. And then we would look at an appointment either at the December 6th council meeting or even prior to that, maybe a special session's called, but it's going to be at the discretion of the council. So I just need to get a good feeling about what that date is as we get November 10th the resumes, depending on the number we have, to try to get a date nailed down with a quorum of the council or those that want to interview and participate. Whether it's a quorum or not, I think it's probably recommended, although the appointment must be done by all of you as a majority. So with that, November 16th, I sent that out on an email. I didn't hear back from everybody.
It's a Tuesday following our next council meeting, so I thought that would be an appropriate time. I'd prefer to do it in the morning if folks are available. I know Steve will probably be difficult for him to make it, but are you guys available?
I'm not.
You're not?
Not.
That week or just that day?
Just that day.
Andy?
I'm available that day.
Ryan?
I can be there.
Ben? Rebecca? Would you have heartburn if we moved forward?
I'll give you my proxy.
Okay. Is that okay with the council if we don't have a full quorum? I just think we need to get this done sooner than later. And we're going to probably cancel our second meeting in December, so time's limited at this point. Okay? It depends how many applicants we receive. We're going to be preparing a series of questions, standardized questions, to ask all of the candidates, so we'll be prepped for you.
Okay, yeah, just mark that day off, morning till early afternoon. Hopefully, we'll be able to. I'm not sure, to be honest. I have no idea what kind of interest we'll get. So,
okay.
All right, and that's all I had on that item.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions for Dana on her report? We'll move on to item 9C, consideration of a request from the Whitefish Housing Authority to allocate ARPA funds for the Snow Lot Townhomes project, and we heard some public testimony to that effect this evening. Dana.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. In your packet is my report on the request from the Whitefish Housing Authority to allocate ARPA funds for the Snow Lot Townhomes project. I'm not going to go and read through the report as you've had it in your packets, but they are requesting $2 million of the city's roughly $2.1 million that we will be receiving over the next year. We have received half of that already. To date, the city has contributed the land, cash in lieu funds, and tax increment funds for this project. So, the goal is to have this project come to fruition. With the pandemic, it's been determined that the cost of building has gone up. ARPA funds are eligible to develop affordable housing, defined as low to moderate income. In my staff report, you can see both Ben and I's analysis on the eligibility of this request. And so I won't go into detail there, but the request would be to fund the units that are 80% AMI, so that it does apply. With that said, unless you have questions, I would just say that we respectfully recommend that the City Council allocates those $2 million of available ARPA funds to the Whitefish Housing Authority to pay for a portion of the 8 units for households in Whitefish making low to moderate income, not to exceed 80% of AMI, Once a budget is established, based on actual costs from the bid process or through finer budgeting, the city manager will prepare and negotiate a contract with the housing authority detailing the specifics of the ARPA funds with an amount limited to the identified funding gap, not to exceed the $2 million. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Dana? I think we'll need some direction from the council to that effect. I'll start with Ben, and I saw Rebecca's hand.
Hey, so Dana, if I know that the housing authority has a preliminary budget and that has this gap in it, if we get to next year or whenever this happens and all of a sudden construction costs are down, maybe we don't need as many funds, or maybe next year we realize that there's another use for these funds that would be equally valuable, do we lose our flexibility here? Like, can we still modify it? As long, I mean, I'm in agreement with the direction of moving this funds towards affordable housing. I'm just wondering if we need to modify the plan as we go. Can we still do that?
So, you know, I think the biggest concern that I'm going to express on behalf of the Housing Authority is that to move forward, they need this funding gap covered. They were looking at possible donations, but with these funds, I think they could move forward through the process. That said, you know, the way that I've at least kind of included the language is that the amount would be limited to the identified funding gap, not to exceed $2 million. So should that funding gap come in at, say, 1.7 million, or it comes all the way down to 1 million, which would be even better, we're not going to be held to that $2 million mark. But until they have more finalized numbers, we would basically be saying we're utilizing ARPA for that purpose. And then as those numbers are refined, we'll be able to release some of those funds. Again, what's the next project down the road? You know, our direction from City Council was to look at how we can support affordable housing in Whitefish. That could be through down payment assistance programs. It could be through contributions to another affordable housing project in town, or, you know, other purposes that we might be able to identify. So I don't believe that it ties your hands, but I would say that you're committing the $2 million, that could be the potential gap with their budget and when it goes out to bid. So,
Further questions for Dana? Rebecca, sorry.
Dana, originally, I thought that the ARPA funds you had identified were, I thought the ARPA funds were gonna help mitigate some of our police and fire over expenses from COVID. But we've already covered that, or what's going on with that?
So initially during the pandemic, the CARES funding that we received actually came back and significantly supported our police and fire, and that we got all of their wages for that year, basically, almost a year. We actually had reimbursed to the city through the CARES funding. So police and fire are set. These ones are more restrictive in that nature that I couldn't just identify it to police and fire. And even the radios, I think, were a long stretch that we had first identified. This use, though, I believe, is eligible based under our reasoning in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Motion, please. Ben.
I will move to approve the request from the Whitefish Housing Authority to allocate American Rescue Plan funds for the Snow Lot townhomes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? I guess my only comment is as a city, we're certainly committed to this project. You know, when we talk about affordability, it's certainly the land cost that's driving the lack of affordability, and I just question if these $2 million could be better leveraged to purchase and secure additional property for future projects to where we can get even higher density or more units than 24, particularly when this is only going to offset the delta for the 8 units that we're deficient in funding for. So just thoughts that go through my mind. I'm certainly not advocating that we not award the money, but I think we need to continue to keep our eye on the prize and realize that it's really land costs that are inhibiting affordable housing here in Whitefish, and we need to do everything we can to start land banking and developing partnerships with private industry to help create affordable housing. With that said, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And the motion carries on a 4-1 vote with Councilor Norton voting in opposition. And we'll move on to our last item, which is consideration to approve the updated site plan for the city-owned property on Monaghan Road with affordable housing. Dana.
All right, thank you. In your packet, you have my report on the proposed site plan for the city-owned property on Monaghan Road with the addition of affordable housing. So starting in July of 2019, the council actually reviewed potential site plan of the 88 acres that the city owns out on Monaghan Road. Most commonly known, that's where our wastewater treatment plant is, as well as our park shop. During that process, affordable housing was identified along Monaghan Road out there, and so this isn't anything unusual in that we've actually had this plan already in the past, but what became important was that I was approached by the Housing Authority and the Community Foundation regarding a significant potential donation to support affordable housing in our community. And with those ideas, planted in my head, it was like, okay, well, where do we find land? And we know that that is one of the biggest challenges, to find the land with the proper zoning to accommodate affordable housing and to make these projects work. I started to look at that plan again, met with city staff, and we identified that we could move where we had originally identified the affordable housing to make it a more suitable location, but to also allow for more immediate development, because where it was originally planned for along Monaghan, we are still utilizing those areas during the wastewater treatment plant remediation and the pond specifically. As we've discussed this with the Housing Authority and the Community Foundation, I got their input on moving forward and bringing this to the City Council. To actually develop affordable housing out there, though, there's quite a few steps that we would have to take. First, we would have to hire a surveyor and complete a site plan, move through the subdivision of the property. We would be looking at the city requesting a growth policy update, and then rezoning the property to a residential use, whether that's WR1 or WR2. That would be up to the council and through the process. I do know that the request would be that it would be WR2 to allow for higher density on that lot. We would also be looking at the road that is in our 2009 transportation plan and still included in our updated one that they're working on. Would also need to be completed to allow access to that back portion of the property. We would work through these steps should it be the council's desire, and then once all 4 of these steps are completed, we would be able to donate the property to the Housing Authority for the development. And we would have something very similar to the snow lot, where we have a contract for development, since we are donating the land for the project. So the initial costs that we would be looking at are the survey and site plan creation, and then obviously the processes that we move forward. We always pay our own fees, so that would be something that we would be doing. With that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but staff does respectfully recommend that the City Council approve the updated site plan for the city-owned property at Monaghan Road and provide direction to proceed with the steps identified within my staff report.
Thanks, Dana. Any questions for Dana, or can I have a motion on this item? Rebecca.
Dana, one idea I had, which was kind of shot down quickly, was where our public works plant is, where all the operations happen. And so I didn't know this was coming until I read the packet. And so have we done an official survey of all the city property? Because every time I've asked this in the past, people say, oh, we don't have any, and then we find some. And so I'm just wondering, could we at some point have a map of all the areas that are potential that we could use? Because there's some big properties that we have, and I think what I get worried about is tying things into the transportation plan and where bridges might be and just different things, because we're trying to solve this really quick problem, which is housing, but I'm not sure that things have been vetted in the long run to tie in with our other long-term plans too, even though I really appreciate you doing this.
So, you know, we own this property, and we do have mapping available, and it might even be available on our website to identify where all of the city-owned land is. A lot of our city-owned land are parks, and they're dedicated as parkland, which we cannot develop. The other property that the city owns aside from this one on Monaghan is our shop property up on 18th Street. The problem with that property is the access to that property is really poor, as 18th Street is very narrow, not to city standards, and very steep. And so we did, you know, extend Flathead Avenue, but again, that's not it's not fully accessible to that lot. Not to mention that used to be a dump site, and I would have concerns about what is up there, and we have a shooting range right next to it. This seemed like the most logical property as you see Shady River Lane right to the north. You have Trailview right to the north as well. The bridge would not necessarily be the connection that would be done now, but it would just be the road to provide that potential connection in the future. This property seemed to be really the only property that could be that could allow for enough density to develop on this land based on our growth policy. While it's designated this lot as governmental and it's for the public use for us, right to the north and to the east, west, to the west across the river, those are all designated urban. And so it's important to kind of see where would that flow. WR1 and WR2 are urban zones. And so that's what we were looking at. So, I think it's also connected to the trail, and in the future, kids could walk across to Super One, and it seemed like the best location we had. But again, the site survey would include the entire property. Staff has looked at what needs they have, for the future. And we haven't even really done that analysis up at the shop as much, but we do have, I want to say 40 acres up there, Craig? 8 up at the shop. Oh, the other shop is, I think it's like 40-ish or 38, something around there, up at the other shop property. So we do have expansion for parks up there as well, because I envision in the future, parks couldn't just operate out of this one south location. We'd probably need one on the west side as well. And we talked about how would that look. Also having an additional location for the parks department up on that side. So hope that answered your question.
Ben.
I do have a question or two. So just to be clear, this is not a request to donate the land. This is a request to take a few steps to survey it, make it available for a future donation if a proposal came back to us that makes sense to do so.
Right. Well, I would say that right now the Housing Authority and the Community Foundation are working with a donor to identify parcels. And so that request is to, utilize this property as an affordable housing development. So that's where that would come forward through. That said, we cannot donate, under the current zoning, we wouldn't be able to donate to that to the Housing Authority. So we would, as the city, have to see this through the process. And see what the community wants for that property, right? Because they would have a series of public hearings. The initial request that I'm making tonight is to just start with the site survey and site plan. Obviously, our beautiful, colorful thing is not to requirements, so.
And then we would see this again when more specifics come back about what's going to be proposed.
Then we would propose, propose the subdivision with that site plan, and then that would start the process, moving it forward.
Sure. And just to ask the question, are we pretty sure there's not going to be another need for this 20 years down the road for another sewer plant or something? I mean, do we have plenty of space for public works? Is everybody feeling good about that?
They did a meeting. You guys have any concerns?
Yeah.
No, I think we're comfortable with that. I will say that I think Citizens for a Better Flathead did raise a good comment, but we're talking about less than an acre, and I think that there's room to, should we decide to move forward with some type of recycling operation out there, there's room within. I mean, those are large chunks of land that we've sort of just blocked off. And obviously, as we move forward with this, we'd have to do a meets and bounds survey, and it may adjust a little bit based on, you know, exactly what's happening out there at the existing wastewater treatment plant. There's quite a bit of decommissioning work that needs to happen, not so much on the north area, but in all those other areas. So, but yeah, no, from a public works perspective, I'm comfortable with that revised map.
Okay, and then the last question I had was, I know when Jerry Dunker brought his project forth, Trailview, there was a lot of extensive discussion about the vehicular traffic in that area. Given that this may be the path towards a more significant development even than that one was, what do you think about that? And how would we address traffic and pedestrian access to that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a concern that we'll have to hear through the public process. I mean, we really just need to get the process started. We anticipate, in the discussions I've had with the Housing Authority and the Community Foundation, is that that road, which would involve a future bridge to connect, would need to be developed as part of this project at the cost of the developer. And so, which would be the Housing Authority, to clarify. And so that would be a requirement of that. I know that doesn't alleviate the traffic concerns, you know, north, but we have worked on connecting the trails so that there's safer pedestrian access out there. So yeah, it's something that I'm sure we'll hear as a concern with this type of development, and any development that is of a significant size.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Or can I have a motion, please? Frank?
Mr. Mayor, I would move forward with the approval of the updated, or move to approve the updated site plan for the city-owned property on Monaghan Road for affordable housing.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Norton. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. We will move on to item 10. Dana, do you want to take this one regarding whether or not we want to cancel, as we traditionally do, the second meeting in December? Or do you still want to keep that as a placeholder, as we discussed? Potential placeholder.
I'll just kind of give you guys an update on what's coming ahead. So potentially with the planning board continuing the Mountain Gateway project, which took an entire meeting and didn't get through all the public comment. At some point that will come to the council. If action is taken on November 18th, it is technically scheduled for December 6th. That said, December 6th already has the Highway 93 South Corridor plan and the recycling continued to that meeting. My recommendation would be that we know that we won't be able to get to all of those items on that agenda, and I don't want to have 170 people show up and not be able to comment. So I think it would only be fair to the public to continue that either to the 20th, and not continue is not the right word, schedule it for either the 20th of December, but again, that's near the holidays, so questionable, or move it all the way to January, the first meeting in January. I confirmed it's a PUD, so we shouldn't run into any issues with a timing aspect. And I think it also takes into consideration with the council elections tomorrow that we won't have one council start reviewing it on, say, December 6th or December 6th or December 20th, and then have to continue it to January with a whole entire, or with the newly elected council. So just want to test the waters. I mean, you guys do not have to hold the December 20th. You typically cancel it, but I also want to kind of be prepared to move the Mountain Gateway project just to accommodate the public comment I anticipate for those items.
My recommendation would be to postpone it to the January 3rd meeting, not postpone, but schedule it for the January 3rd meeting for the reasons Dana stated. If that's okay with the council?
What are we running on time constraint from application date?
We're not. It's a PUD.
None with that?
It's a PUD, yep.
Yeah, PUD, okay.
Is that good with everyone? We'll go ahead and cancel December 20th and see the Mountain Gateway on January 3rd.
Yep, assuming planning board takes action.
Yep,
Okay.
Thanks, Dana. We'll turn to comments from the council. Rebecca, anything this evening?
Yes, I just wondered about Toby Scott's letter about the town pump trees, being very small, and are they compliant with what they had agreed to put in, and what are we doing about it? And then the second thing is, don't forget to vote by tomorrow at 8 p.m. It's too late to mail it, but you can drop it by the City Hall from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. tomorrow, and that's it.
Thanks, Rebecca. Ben?
I mean, I want to hear from Maria. Oh,
Maria can give an update.
Sorry, Maria, I didn't see your hand go up.
No, that's okay. I can give an update on the town pump trees. Our city forester and our arborist were present during the planting of the 22 trees. Those trees were received from a local nursery, which was in accordance with our agreement. The agreement stated that we would get the largest trees available locally. In the past 2 years, just like many other supply items, we have a supply-demand problem with trees. If you recall, Texas had a big freeze. They lost a lot of their trees, and at that time, they received a large grant that then gave them the ability to secure a lot of trees from nurseries in other states, which created a national supply problem as well. So our local nurseries were having some challenges getting large trees, but we did secure the largest ones that we could.
so we're not getting any large trees. We're only getting 6-foot trees to fill in all of those huge trees that were 100 to 200 years old.
In accordance with the agreement that the council set forth with Town Pump, we received the largest trees locally that we could, and we received 22 of those trees.
How long does it take a 6-foot tree to grow that long? That, like 100 more years? Yeah.
Depends on the species and it depends on the condition.
And legally, this is what we've agreed to do, and so there's no recourse whatsoever.
You can't find larger caliber trees locally, and the arborist also indicated that if you plant more mature trees, the survival rate decreases significantly compared to the age classes of these trees.
Just kind of a bitter pill to swallow for the community, but thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Ben?
I agree with that, but no further comment.
Thanks, Ben. Ryan?
Don't forget to vote tomorrow, because if you don't vote, then you can't complain, and that's no fun. That's all I have.
Thanks, Ben. Andy?
No comment. I just want to thank Rebecca for the beautiful flowers in the back of the room tonight. That's lovely, lovely touch. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And Frank?
No comments further.
All I have is, you received the letter that Craig and I drafted to DOT regarding the urban highway project. Any comments, questions, or just a showing of hands real quickly that we can send that on to DOT? All right. With that said, anything further, Dana? We are adjourned.